Chapter 682. What's this? Marjorie asked curiously. Is it a newly brewed fruit wine? If it's just fruit wine, it won't sell as well as perfume. Nibelung shook his head. That's not necessarily true. Gammon looked at the glass bottle with great interest. Let's not talk about what's in the bottle. This unique container alone is worth several golden dragon coins. Is it a new product of the alchemist workshop of King City? Marlene echoed. I've never seen such a big crystal glass bottle before. The appearance is not important. The key lies in the product itself. Roland did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect these merchants to be interested in the glass bottle first. As long as the formula was mastered, the colorless glass was a low-cost and mass-produced product. However, he did not sell glass containers alone because the current glass output in Neverwinter was used by chemical laboratories, perfume factories, and beverage factories. It's called Chaos Drink. Just like its name, it's chaotic and unpredictable. Every sip is a unique enjoyment. He cleared his throat and pretended to be mysterious. I bet you've never tasted a similar taste. If you don't believe me, try it and you'll know. The 3 bottles of drinks were carefully selected by Roland from Evelyn's beverage library. Not only did they taste unique, but 2 of them were also specially processed. One was chilled, and the other was filled with dry ice, which could be said to be the world's first carbonated drink. And the result was just as he expected. As soon as they took a sip, the 5 merchants' faces showed a wonderful expression. How on earth was this made? Ataïr smacked his lips. Compared with those fruit wines, they're completely tasteless. Look at this glass of green apple juice, it's still steaming. My God, is it breathing? Apple? Even honey can't be so sweet. The merchants expressed their opinions one after another, and at the same time, they did not stop raising their glasses. The drinks were downed one after another, until all 3 bottles were empty. Burp. Gammon licked his lips and said, Your Majesty, your chaos drinks are amazing. If it's sold as a commodity, do you think there will be a market? Of course. The merchant from Crescent Moon Bay said without hesitation. Taking into account the different tastes, the popularity of the 3 beverages may be slightly different, but they are definitely rare wines. I bet that after tasting it, no one will be interested in the high-quality fruit wine from the Kingdom of Dawn anymore. You're quite frank. Roland couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth. Normally, if a merchant wanted to buy a product, they would pick out some flaws to lower the price. It was rare to see such a straightforward praise. I dare not lie to His Majesty, nor do I want to lie to my own tongue. Gamor paused for a moment. But there's one thing I don't quite understand. Tell me about it. Why did you give it such a weird name? He picked up the iced bottle, which still had a thin layer of hoarfrost on it. For example, this can be called a deep-sea ice spring. If it was in summer, I can guarantee that it would appear in every banquet. As for that bottle of numbing green drink, I think it can be called fish egg dew. To be honest, the sour and numbing feeling of countless little fish breaking out of their eggs and hitting the tongue is really memorable, Marlene added. I think so too. Marjorie laughed. Although the word chaos sounds very novel, it can't highlight their distinct characteristics. If they were named separately, they would definitely sell better. Roland pretended to be regretful and said, Unfortunately, as I said before, every sip of these drinks is a unique enjoyment. In fact, these 3 bottles are the last in stock. You mean, they can't be brewed anymore? Yes, I can't reveal the process of making chaos drinks to you, but the final result is always changing. If there's one thing they have in common, it's that they're all delicious. That's why I named it chaos. No matter what taste it is, it's always one sip less. Everyone gasped, and everyone saw the incredulity in each other's eyes. The rarer something is, the more precious it is. This drink, which was of excellent quality and could not be replicated, could definitely bring a storm to the fjords, and even the 4 kingdoms. Your Majesty, please leave it to me. Gammon was the first to speak. The fleets of Crescent Moon Bay are all over the coasts of the Four Kingdoms. Only we can bring you the most generous returns. Isn't the sea trade center of Crescent Moon Bay always the Kingdom of Dawn? When did the Kingdom of Everwinter open a trade route? The Chamber of Commerce of Shallow Water City criticized. Sunset Island has the most merchant ships heading for the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter. You're deceiving His Majesty. Atair followed closely behind. Roland stretched out his hand and interrupted the dispute between the three. About this matter, let's establish a joint chamber of commerce. Joint chamber of commerce? That's right. In order to avoid malicious competition, participants will sit down and jointly negotiate the areas they are responsible for, and Neverwinter will only be responsible for providing the goods. He tried his best to describe the concept of regional agents. You all have trade routes that have been in operation for a long time, and you also have sales towns that you are familiar with. In this way, you can divide the market according to your advantages. You can sell your goods quickly, and you won't have to compete with your peers. The final sales revenue will be divided according to the proportion stipulated in the contract, so that all participants can be guaranteed. This principle was very simple, and the merchants present quickly understood. It sounds good, but how will the specific areas and the proportion be divided? The cost of bringing the drink to the Kingdom of Everwinter and selling it in the fjords is huge. Of course, transportation costs are also a factor to consider, in addition to labor costs, sales price, product output, and so on. In general, in the case of limited supply, the agent with the highest cost will get a certain degree of preferential treatment. Of course, the details need to be discussed gradually until all participants are satisfied. At first glance, this would seem to reduce the total income, but in fact, after eliminating malicious competition, and with the three chambers of commerce playing their strengths, the profits would be much higher. Due to the lack of sales channels, many goods in Neverwinter were still for internal consumption in the convenience market. For Roland, these fjords merchants who made a fortune by reselling goods were the best suppliers. In the future, he would provide the goods, and these sea merchants would sell them to all corners of the continent, which was undoubtedly the most labor-saving method. I'm willing to join. Marjorie was the first to express her support. Seeing that someone had expressed her support, the others also showed an attitude of temporarily giving it a try. Chapter 683. Fjords, Sleeping Island. As winter approached, the sea breeze blowing across the island became colder. Even with the windows closed, Tilly could still hear the sharp whistling sound of the cold wind passing through the gaps. Normally, not many people would be willing to hang out outside at this time, but in fact, people were always celebrating in the central square of Sleeping Island. The grand bonfire party had lasted for several days. Pot after pot of hot fish soup was boiled. The witches displayed their abilities and turned the square into a pleasant paradise. If there were not so many things to deal with, Tilly would also like to join the party and share the joy of the church's defeat with everyone. Since she had brought the news back, the witches' lives had changed completely, not in terms of living conditions, but in terms of their spirits. Everyone seemed to have been relieved of a heavy burden. Their eyes were brighter than before, and their words and actions were obviously relaxed and free. From that moment on, they finally did not have to live in worry and fear. The mountain that had been pressing on their heads suddenly collapsed, the dense haze disappeared, and even the whistling cold wind could not dispel their enthusiasm. This was probably the feeling of liberation that Roland had mentioned, Tilly thought. At this moment, Camilla Derry, the chief butler of Sleeping Island, knocked on the door and walked into the room. Your Highness, I've done a preliminary count of the witches who are willing to go to the Western region. She sat cross-legged opposite Tilly and put a stack of names on the low table. Almost half of them have signed up to support the Western region. Really? It's much better than I expected. Thank you. Tilly nodded with a smile and picked up the list to read carefully. As for moving to the Western region, Princess Tilly told the witches on the island that they would support the construction of Neverwinter to resist a greater disaster, the arrival of the Battle of Divine Will. In order to make the witches loyal to their own wishes, Tilly did not hide the news about the Witch Empire, the Union, and the demons. Instead, she clearly told them that the church was only a part of the Union, and that the real enemies of the people were demons from another world. They did not have mercy, nor did they have the slightest mercy, so helping the Western region was also helping themselves. Of course, even if he lived on the island, it wouldn't be a problem for him to live the rest of his life in peace. She had thought that many of her sisters would be frightened by the new enemy, or that they would be tired of dealing with ordinary people and would have doubts about the uncertain future, so they would decide to stay on Sleeping Island. However, based on the statistics of nearly half of the witches, the demons that they had never met were far less terrible than the church, and the witches' yearning for the outside world had not been extinguished. They are very interested in Prince Roland, who defeated the Pope. They all want to see what kind of person the Lord, who eradicated the greatest enemy of the witches, looks like. Camilla sighed helplessly. And there is also a very important point. The identity of your brother also gives him a lot of points. They have also transferred their trust in you to him. You don't look very reassured. Of course, he is, after all, a noble and an ordinary person. He is fundamentally different from us, and with all due respect, when it comes to interests, blood can sometimes be a hindrance. Chief Butler frowned slightly. Your Highness, I'm not questioning your decision, nor am I saying that your brother is two-faced, but in case. I mean in case what he seeks is contrary to the interests of the witches, and he raises a butcher's knife against us again like the other nobles, what should we do? I understand your concern. I made this decision after careful consideration. Tilly put down the list and held Camilla's hand. Witches may be different from ordinary people, but under the threat of the battle of divine will, we have the same goal, and that is to survive. Instead of completely avoiding the secular world, why not take this opportunity to integrate into it and form an inseparable community of interests with ordinary people? When our abilities go deep into various fields, even if Roland wants to break the agreement with Sleeping Island, he can't leave the witch's power. But, will he loosen his control over us? In the past 6 months, Roland hasn't imposed any additional restrictions on witches. Otherwise, the Witch Union of the Western region wouldn't have supported him unreservedly. Tilly smiled. And compared to these principles, I believe in my intuition more. Intuition? Well, I don't think he will do such a thing, she said slowly, knocking on the table. Camilla was stunned for a moment, and finally laughed as if surrendering. Come to think of it, ever since I met you, your judgment has never been wrong. It will be the same this time. Tilly raised the corner of her mouth. I understand, Your Highness. Chief Butler put his hand on his chest and said, I'll finish the preparations for the witches' migration as soon as possible. Thank you. Princess Tilly knew that Camilla, who was originally a noble, had long lost confidence in this social class because she had seen too much of the power struggles and dirty deeds among the nobles. However, she did not know that Roland was not like a traditional noble at all. The more she got to know him, the more obvious it became to Tilly. Not only did he treat witches this way, but he also treated everyone else in a completely different way compared to the nobles. She called him brother, not because of his past relationship with Prince Roland, but because she simply liked to get along without any barriers or prejudice. When talking with Roland, she always felt relaxed and comfortable, which she had not felt for a long time. She believed that other witches also felt the same way. By the way, I've heard some bad rumors recently. Camilla changed the subject. What rumors? It's related to the news you brought back. Some people think that since witches used to create a huge empire and brought all ordinary people under their rule, they should imitate the Union and create an organization with witches as the leaders to restore the glory of their ancestors. What about the source? Tilly raised her eyebrows. Is it the witches of the Bloodfang Association? No. They believe in being loyal to the strong. The Western region was able to defeat the seemingly invincible enemy, and with the help of Iffy, Soft Feathers, and Nightfall, those combat witches were the first batch of people to sign up to support Neverwinter. Camilla shook her head. I've investigated it. The source should be from other witch organizations. The witches of Sleeping Island were a large group. In addition to the Blood Fang Association, there were also some scattered groups, such as the Witch Cooperation Association in Sewanshire. Before she launched the call, these groups were generally formed to escape the arrest of the church and to help each other. However, they did not have the strength of the Blood Fang Association and rarely criticized Tilly's policies. I see. She nodded. Do you need me to talk to their leader? Chapter 684. After Camilla Derry left, Ashes walked out of the study. She knelt on the carpet and stretched out her hands to Tilly. Come on. Actually, I'm fine. Don't force yourself. There's no one else here, Ashes interrupted. Tilly curled her lips, but in the end, she moved her body and leaned into Roland's embrace. Through her clothes, she could hear Ash's strong and powerful heartbeat. It was like the rhythmic beat of a drum, which made her feel steady and steady. Thank you, Tilly said in a low voice. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Even if we make a wrong judgment, we can just go back to Sleeping Island. Ashes chuckled. Roland Wimbledon won't dare to stop you. Otherwise, the sisters in the Witch Union won't just sit by and watch. She paused. And you don't have to be so sure. Otherwise, the pressure won't be as great as it is now. Princess Tilly shook her head. If I want to convince others, I have to convince myself first. If I show a trace of hesitation and confusion, I won't be able to carry out this decision. Although she appeared to be confident, it was impossible to say that she did not feel a little uneasy. It was not that she was worried about Roland. In fact, when he agreed to let Sleeping Spell continue to manage the witches' migration, it showed his attitude. What she worried about was whether the more than 300 witches who had been away from the secular world for nearly 2 years could smoothly integrate into Neverwinter, and whether the ordinary people's views on witches would change after the end of the Battle of Divine Will. These were all unknown risks, and Tilly had no choice but to consider them. In the eyes of others, she was always full of confidence and spirit, but in fact, only a few people understood her real feelings. After all, now she not only needed to take care of herself, but also the fate of more than 300 witches on the island. It could be said that after the church was defeated, all the witches on Sleeping Island felt unprecedentedly relaxed. Only she felt that the responsibility on her shoulders had become heavier. Then do as you think. Ashes hugged her from behind. Anyway, the migration won't start until the end of the months of demons next year. If you're still worried, use the next few months to take a good look. Is the charming beauty ready to sail? Anytime. Don't forget to bring your textbooks and exercise books. You can learn new things on the way. If I read in the cabin, I will get seasick. If you want to protect me, of course you have to become stronger, such as the legendary Transcendent. How can you become stronger if you don't study? Ashes let out a painful groan. All right, I got it. Don't worry. If there's anything you don't understand, you can always ask me. There's nothing else to do on the ship, right? Yes, as you wish, Your Highness. Fortunately, he was no longer alone. No matter what the road ahead would be, there would always be someone by his side. Okay, Tilly answered. She closed her eyes and felt the warmth on her back. Her shoulders seemed to have lightened a lot. The cold wind was still howling outside the window, but the room was as warm as spring. The establishment of the Joint Chamber of Commerce was a complicated process. Every contract needed to be finalized by many parties. After Roland entrusted this matter to Berev and Edith, he turned his attention to the winter battle plan. There was no doubt that this year's months of demons would come much later than the previous year. Today was the last day of the end of autumn, but there was still no sign of snow except for the gray sky outside the window. This was good news for Neverwinter. The later the months of demons came, the faster the construction team could build 2 more houses. According to the report from City Hall, the Western region's supplies had increased significantly compared to previous years, especially in terms of food. The annual output of the Longsong area had reached more than 10 times that of the past. If Perrault had not built a batch of grain depots and transported half of the wheat to the border area, the stronghold would not have been able to hold so much food. With enough food, no matter what they did, they would be confident. Secondly, there was the ammunition storage. Anna improved the new generation of machine tools and processing machinery for the processing and loading of bullets, which greatly improved the production efficiency and made up for the loss after the battle with the church. With food and weapons in hand, Roland's mind began to wander. Defending Neverwinter against the invasion of demonic beasts was undoubtedly the First Army's top priority, but it seemed a waste to gather thousands of soldiers in the city. After all, the main direction of the demonic beasts' attack was the Big Hermes Gap, and the Misty Forest was just a fish that had escaped the net. Moreover, the firepower of the army was more than 10 times that of a year ago. Ordinary demonic beasts might not even be able to reach the edge of the city wall. Another thing that made him eager was that not only the demonic beasts were no match for the First Army, but the whole continent was not any better. If it was said that during the battle with Duke Ryan, he still needed all of his men to charge forward with guns and cannons. But now, he only needed to pull out a team of 500 men and they would be able to sweep away any knights who dared to charge forward. Then, while defending the city wall, would it be feasible to send a team to open up a second battlefield to reduce the burden of next year's expedition? Roland found that this was not too difficult a problem. Originally, when the months of demons came, the endless snow would completely block the western region. But now, for Neverwinter, which had dozens of cement transport ships, the land route was no longer an obstacle. The First Army could still use the Redwater River to transport soldiers and supplies to their destination. As long as the plan was right, Neverwinter was completely capable of winning 2 wars at the same time. Well, it sounded like a hegemonic country. After receiving Hill's letter, Roland did not pretend to order the northern region to enter a state of war preparation. If Apan Moya, the King of Dawn, really ignored the warning and captured the ambassador and his team, then he could only change the plan and force the Kingdom of Dawn to release them first. However, the cross-border battle required a lot of logistics. If he sent too few soldiers, it would be difficult to maintain the supply line. Besides, the Hermes Plateau guarded by the church could collapse at any time, so it was not the right time to attack the neighboring country. Fortunately, the emissaries were safe and sound in the end, so he could also set his target closer to the western region. "Your Majesty, what can I do for you?" As the office door was pushed open, Iron Axe strode in. "Are you interested in going back to your homeland in winter? It shouldn't be too hot if you go back now." Roland spread out a simple map of Greycastle, pointed to a small protruding corner in the south, and asked with a smile, "I remember that you and Echo are both from this desert, right?" Chapter 685. Your Majesty, are you going to send troops to the southernmost region now? Iron Axe, who had always been calm, showed a rare excitement. "But the months of demons are coming soon. How many people do you think should be left in Neverwinter to deal with the swarming demonic beasts?" "Well." Iron Axe took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed his excitement. "According to the scale of the previous year, 1,000 people should be enough to defend the city wall. So, to be on the safe side, 2,500 soldiers should be more than enough. Moreover, a new batch of reserve troops has been recruited, so it won't be a problem to defend Neverwinter." Roland stood up and walked to the French window. "Let me tell you about the southernmost region. You should be the most familiar with the people there." "Yes, Your Majesty." Iron Axe saluted. "Most of the land in the southernmost region is yellow sand. Oases are scattered along the silver stream to the west of the desert. More than 90% of the Majans live in these oases. There is a city built on the largest oasis, which is also the only city in the southernmost region, Iron Sand City." "Is the silver stream a river?" "It can only be regarded as half a river," Iron Axe explained. "Most of the time, it's buried in the ground, like the underground Styx River. The exposed part has become an oasis, so the Majans also call it the River of Life." Roland turned around and asked curiously, "Where does it originate from?" "According to the map, there are no mountains or lakes nearby. It originates from the sea." It's a gift from the sea god. Iron Axe walked to the table and pointed to the western part of the southernmost region where the green land was connected. There's a huge karst cave here. The seawater constantly flows into the cave. When you stand on it, you can feel the tremors under your feet. You mean the seawater is the source of the silver stream? But it can obviously breed oases. The fact that it could breed oases meant that the silver stream was a freshwater river. The seawater was too salty to be used for irrigation and drinking, which sounded completely unreasonable. Mother Earth absorbed the salt in the seawater. That area is covered with white salt powder, which also isolated the green land of Greycastle. When you need salt, you just need to take a bucket and scoop it from the ground. Is this the work of Mother Nature? The soil under the yellow sand actually filtered out the salt and formed a saline alkali land? Roland clicked his tongue in wonder. It seemed that apart from oil, there was another resource that he needed to collect. How many people live in the Iron Sand City? About 40,000. Even more than the old king's city of Greycastle. Your Majesty, the city of the Sand Nation is different from the capital of the kingdom, Iron Axe said with a smile. Iron Sand City only has one core area for the rulers of the 6 clans to live in. The periphery is basically filled with tents or thatched bungalows. The city has gradually become what it is today. As long as you enter the oasis, you'll be considered to have entered the territory of Iron Sand City. What about the Majins who live in other oases? There should be quite a number of them, right? Roland asked. Population was the key to quickly converting local specialties into usable resources. It was unlikely that he would dispatch a large number of people from Neverwinter to extract oil. In the end, he still had to use the locals to work for him. The commander-in-chief nodded. No one has counted, but I estimate that there are at least 100,000 of them. Then it should be enough to build several mining stations and a transportation line. The next problem was how to control them. By the way, what about the holy duel you mentioned last time? How do the Majins determine their ruling rights? This time, Iron Axe's answer was very detailed. After about half an hour, Roland finally figured out the way the Sand Nation competed for power. Putting aside the promotion within the clan for now, for these aliens who revered strength, great strength was the only thing that was worth trusting. The ruling class of Iron Sand City was usually composed of 6 clans. They were not under the Wanshire family, but fought for power with their own strength. However, in order to avoid the clans fighting for power and profit, which would weaken the ability of the clans to deal with external dangers, it became the best choice to select a small number of people as representatives for the duel. Over time, this rule was recognized by all the Sand Nation and was given a sacred meaning. Whether it was the big clans that lived in Iron Sand City or the small clans born in the oasis, they all had to abide by the result of the holy duel. Anyone who tarnished the duel would be despised by all the Sand Nation. Is the supreme ruler of the Majins the chiefs of the clans? Roland was puzzled. Don't you have a chief or something like that? A chief? A leader who can unify all the clans, like the king of Greycastle. Well. Iron Axe hesitated. There's a saying among the clans that if you want all the Sand Nation to surrender, there are only 2 ways. One is to get the affirmation and blessing of the 3 gods, and the other is to open up a vast oasis for the clan, eliminate the overwhelming sandstorm, and keep the Sand Nation away from hunger, thirst, and death. The approval of the 3 gods. How do you calculate that? Roland frowned. In the Land of Fire, you just need to offer the corresponding offerings to the 3 gods, namely, the giant armored scorpion that rules the earth, the unicorn that rules the southernmost corner, and the 4-winged eagle that rules the sky. Iron Axe paused. These 3 beasts come and go like ghosts and have taken away countless lives, but no one has ever found their lair. Baits and traps don't work. I even guess that they may be hybrid demonic beasts that have the most basic intelligence. Both conditions were not easy to achieve, especially the second one, which was to make an oasis grow in the desert, which was almost close to the power of God. Roland could not help but be lost in thought. If he could only let Echo regain the position of chief and take revenge for the framing 5 years ago, it would not be of much help to unify the entire southernmost region. Although the 6 clans were different in status, there was no direct relationship between them, let alone the Sand Nation scattered in the oasis. He had to think of a way to make himself the chief of the Majin clan. In addition, he had to consider the Holy Duel. The First Army might be able to easily defeat the guards of Iron Sand City, but it would not be so easy to make the Sand Nation voluntarily obey the rule. The most suitable way was to use the rules set by the Majin clan to realize the annexation plan. Can we invite people from other clans to fight in the duel? That's not a problem, Iron Axe affirmed. I'm a mixed blood, but I can still participate in the duel on behalf of the Osha clan. In fact, brave gladiators are often welcomed by the big clans, and they are the only hope for the small clans to turn over. If there are 3 or 4 brave gladiators in the later generations, there is hope for a better ranking in the Holy Duel. Chapter 686. 3 days later, which was the second day of winter, Bhairav brought the news that the Joint Chamber of Commerce had signed a contract successfully. The final result of the negotiation was that Marjorie would be responsible for the mainland sales of Grey Castle, Sunset Island, and Shallow Water Town would be responsible for the island, the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart respectively, and Crescent Moon Bay would take over the other islands in the fjords and the Kingdom of Dawn. To Roland's surprise, he also saw an arithmetic equation in the contract, which basically set several major conditions as unknowns, fill in the equation according to the specific situation, and then get a share of the current year's income. Who wrote this? Roland asked curiously. My disciple, Bhairav said with a smile while stroking his beard. During the summary, he found that instead of making a complicated schedule, it was more appropriate to use this formula to express it, and all 3 parties agreed on its accuracy. I don't remember this being taught in the universal education. Didn't you open an intermediate class? I bought a set of mathematics textbooks for each disciple and asked them to attend Lady Scroll's lectures whenever they had time. He sighed. I'm getting old, and I can't keep up with these young people, so I have to let them take advantage of me. If I were 10 years younger, I would definitely carry these books with me and read them every day, Your Majesty. This flattery made Roland feel good all over. Furthermore, he realized that mathematical knowledge was helpful for financial and administrative management. The head steward's insight was quite good. What about Edith? How did she do in this negotiation? Not too bad. Bhairav coughed twice. Although she charmed those merchants, she obviously lacked experience when it came to specific commercial terms. I guess she rarely dealt with sea merchants. After all, the trade in the northern region is not developed, unlike the old King's City, where the finance minister almost every day had to summon visiting fjords merchants. Back then. I see. Seeing that the chief was about to go back into his memory mode, Roland hurriedly interrupted. In that case, you should teach her more. The old chief's face stiffened. This. Your Majesty, she actually. That's settled, Roland said gloatingly. Judging from the frequency of Nightingale pinching his shoulder from behind, he knew that his words were not credible. However, he did not want to deal with this kind of tattletale competition, as long as he did not screw up. By the way, how many people did Neverwinter increase this year? Did it meet the target? Although there was still about a month to go before the end of the year, with the arrival of winter, the immigration missions would gradually return to Neverwinter, and the number of immigrants would inevitably decrease. At the mention of this, Bhairav's face immediately bloomed into a smile. The wrinkles on his forehead were squeezed into a ravine, and the awkwardness from before also disappeared. Your Majesty, the City Hall has done the statistics. There are more than 80,000 people who moved here from all over the country, and 50% of them came here voluntarily. Including the natives in the border area and Border and Longsong, of Border, the population of Neverwinter has reached 110,000. Oh. Roland was delighted. Half of them came voluntarily. Most of them came from the central and eastern region of the kingdom. It was not obvious in spring and summer, but in autumn, the proportion began to increase. At this rate, by next year, the traitors who supported Timothy will probably not be able to sit still. This should be the effect of Theo spreading the news of the church's defeat to the eastern region. However, Roland still hoped that the nobles would persist for a while, so that he would have an excuse to eradicate them altogether and return a stable and orderly new kingdom to the people of the eastern region. Are the preparations for the winter ready? 2 months ago, the city hall was ready, Berev replied with full confidence. The Ministry of Construction commissioned Miss Lotus to build a new batch of caves between the impassable mountain range and the Redwater River, in order to replace the shacks that were leaking. We've stockpiled a large amount of charcoal to make sure that everyone can get a basket. After Roland's repeated influence, City Hall now finally got used to, no one will freeze to death in winter, no one will starve to death, as the administrative goal, and implemented it in various decrees and measures. He nodded with gratification. Very good. Tell Scroll for me to not forget to educate her in winter. Yes, Your Majesty. In addition, I plan to launch a small-scale war without affecting the normal operation of Neverwinter, and the target is the southernmost region. When Iron Axe makes a specific combat plan, you can cooperate with him to mobilize all kinds of resources. Seeing that Berev was hesitant to speak, Roland walked to him and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. After the director left, Nightingale appeared and asked confusedly, is it okay? When he talked about Edith, it was obviously inconsistent with the actual situation. Even without using his ability, I can see it from his expression. If I reprimand him for this, I'm afraid he won't dare to directly suppress Edith anymore. Roland spread out his hands. In order to maintain the balance of City Hall, someone has to restrict the Pearl of the Northern region. At present, only Berev can do this. But why restrict her? If she has enough ability to manage City Hall, it won't be bad for you. Because. Roland opened his mouth, but found that he did not know what to say for a moment. That's right, why did he have to restrict Edith? Is he worried that she will be the only one in power? The possibility of this is very small. As long as I am the king, I can replace her with a word. Moreover, City Hall is not allowed to interfere with the army. Even if she controls all the administrative departments, she will not be a threat to the throne. In fact, when the City Hall staff are selected according to the recruitment notice and paid by the Treasury, the impact of replacing a manager has been minimized. Is he worried that she will deceive and tamper with the decree? At least not in Neverwinter. The effect of any decree will be transmitted to Roland's ears. Moreover, the city is not so big, so the transmission of information is almost real-time. Before coming to this world, what he hated the most was the way of checks and balances, especially in the workplace. When his boss regarded it as the way of the king, he sneered at it. He did not expect that after becoming the ruler, he would subconsciously think of this. If not for Nightingale's reminder, he might not have realized that he was gradually becoming the kind of person he hated. Power does need to be checked and balanced, but it should not be played by another person or a few people, but by policies, institutions, and laws. Without violating these frameworks, it is the right way to let his subordinates play to the fullest extent. Roland heaved a sigh of relief. He pursed his lips and was about to thank Nightingale when he found that her eyes were completely focused outside the window. "Look, it's snowing," she said softly. Roland turned around and found that countless white spots had quietly appeared in the gray sky. They were like light elves that were slowly floating down. Chapter 687. In the underground pivotal secret temple of the holy city of Hermes. Tayfun hadn't had a good night's sleep for more than 2 months. As long as he closed his eyes, his ears would echo with the pitiful cries of Archbishop Eyre. She had been dragged back by the Judgment Army. The enemy's weapon had smashed her abdomen and turned her intestines into a pot of porridge. Even with all kinds of herbs, the wound could not be prevented from worsening. After struggling for 2 days, she died in extreme pain. Tayfun had begun to doubt the strength of Greycastle after the vanguard led by Soli Dal suffered a head-on attack. He had repeatedly asked His Holiness Maine to think twice before making a decision. He wanted to find out the details of this army as much as possible before making a decision. However, Maine was not swayed at all. He insisted that the main force should immediately attack the defense line of Grey Castle at the foot of Coldwind Ridge. He knew that the church might pay a heavy price, but he did not expect it to be so heavy. What was even more unexpected was that the most elite force of the church, the unstoppable God's Punishment Army, had been defeated. When he heard this unbelievable news, Tayfun spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the top of the Tower of Babel. However, this was not the only incredible thing. None of the pure witches had returned, and His Holiness Maine was nowhere to be found. It was not until he gritted his teeth and forced his way into the pivotal secret agency with a group of people that he learned an incredible piece of news from the guards. Maine was not the successor that O'Brien had chosen. It was Pure Witch Zero who had inherited the scepter and crown. The Holy City had suddenly lost its pope. The only thing Tayfun could do was to keep this news underground forever. All the people he had brought with him had joined the pivotal secret temple, and he had become the temporary pope. In the following month, Tayfun spent all his time maintaining the order of the Holy City and reading the secret history of the library. The secrets of the witches' hunting, the creation of the God's Punishment Army, the origin of the church, and the collapse of the witch empire were revealed to him little by little. The old bishop felt that his worldview had been turned upside down. No matter how hard he tried, he could not imagine that the church had been created by witches. Even the witch empire, which had influence all over the barbarian land, was unable to stop the demons' advance. Both the God's Punishment Army and the sigil of magic stones were the products left behind by the exiled witches. As he tossed and turned in the middle of the night, Tayfun's spirit was rapidly drained. 2 months felt like 2 years. The wrinkles on his face were as deep as the old bishop's, and his every movement was slow and sluggish, like an oil lamp that had run out of oil. However, he knew that he could not stop. Once he fell, the church would really be finished. A large number of judgment warriors were selected from the reserve team. The new archbishops and the middle-level believers who had been injured were appointed and dismissed as quickly as possible. Coupled with the call to live and die with the Holy City, the precarious situation was temporarily stabilized. However, Tayfun knew that this was just a facade. The losses of the God's Punishment Army could not be quickly replenished, and the fighting capacity of the young warriors was far inferior to that of the older generation. In times of peace, he could slowly make up for it. However, now that the months of demons had arrived, and he could not stop the demonic beast's attack, it was impossible to rely on the power of the church alone. He had to unite the forces of the nobles in the kingdom of Wolfheart and the kingdom of Everwinter, just like how the 4 kingdoms united to guard the defense line in Hermes in the past. It was not easy to make the nobles who had joined the church obey his orders. Tayfun could even imagine that when the news of the church's defeat spread to the kingdom of Wolfheart and the kingdom of Everwinter, the nobles who still held the territory and the knight would once again jump out to oppose him. Therefore, when most of the troops of the Grey Castle withdrew from the northern region, he sent the last 100 God's Punishment warriors and the emissary delegation to the Holy City to force the nobles to obey his orders. Now, both the old and the new holy cities were in an unprecedented state of weakness. The old bishop could only pray that the emissary delegation could bring reinforcements back to Hermes before the demonic beasts launched a large-scale attack. Tayfun rubbed the sore corners of his eyes and closed the ancient book that recorded the transformation ceremony of the God's Punishment warriors. When he was about to make himself a cup of winter flower tea to relieve his headache, he suddenly heard the sound of fighting outside the temple. He was so shocked that his hand trembled, and the teacup fell to the ground and immediately broke into pieces. How could there be intruders here? He walked to the window and looked down, only to see a group of figures moving under the dim light of the prism of the god's stone. They were constantly approaching the pivotal secret temple. Their speed was shockingly fast, and the imperial guards who fought with them fell almost instantly. Their armor seemed to be useless in front of their sharp blades, and the grayish-white steps were stained with blood that splattered everywhere. In the blink of an eye, the enemies had already pushed to the door of the temple. "Your Excellency, the pivotal secret temple is under attack. Please leave immediately." The door of the library was slammed open, and a captain of the Praetorian Guard anxiously walked in, followed by 10 God's punishment warriors, who were obviously the Pope's personal bodyguards. How on earth did they get in? Taifun roared in a hoarse voice. There were only 2 ways to go underground. One was to use the hanging cage to descend, and the other was to go through the secret fortress of the Old Holy City. Even the army of Greycastle could not suddenly occupy the Old and the New Holy City without being noticed, unless they all had wings. The Imperial Guard captain looked very upset. The enemies came from the depths of the cave. Your Excellency, please follow me immediately, or it will be too late. The depths of the cave? Taifun asked incredulously. There was nothing there except for the big and small round holes. With great shock and confusion, he followed the Imperial Guard captain down the secret passage inside the wall and soon arrived at the bottom of the temple. The hanging cage is unguarded, so it's probably not safe anymore. I'll escort you to the passage of the Old Holy City, and please take people back to the pivotal secret temple as soon as possible, the Imperial Guard captain said as he pushed open the movable stone door hidden in the corner. As soon as Taifun stepped out of the secret passage, his heart instantly sank to the bottom. He saw more than 10 enemies standing there with swords, as if they already knew this was the exit of the secret passage. I thought I would never have the chance to set foot in the Holy City again. I didn't expect the descendants who inherited the will of the Queen of Starfall Star to be so mediocre. A man in a strange armor that seemed to be pieced together by many pieces of metal came up to him. The mottled blade of his sword was faintly stained with blue blood. However, when Taifun noticed his face, he felt his blood freeze instantly. He had seen this man's face before. Ellington, the presiding judge of the 6th Advance Troop, had participated in the transformation ceremony of the God's Punishment Army 3 years ago. Before leaving, this brave and fearless warrior had personally said goodbye to him. An indescribable chill crawled up the old bishop's spine and into his mind. The strange fear made him almost unable to control his tongue. Chapter 688. Monster. The Scourge sneered. Weren't you the ones who created this body? You transformed it with witch blood and God's stone of retaliation into a transcendent warrior. Unfortunately, due to the lack of a key step, the transcendent warrior became a defective product without a soul. You have pinned your hopes on this shell of strength to defeat the devil, and now you call the finished product a monster. A real, finished product. Taifun's heart was filled with astonishment. The production method of the God's Punishment Army was the Church's core secret, but it seemed that the other party not only knew about it, but also knew more about it than he did. Attack at will and kill them. The Chief Justice shouted. 10 God's Punishment warriors swarmed over the Archbishop at an extremely fast speed and rushed toward the enemy. However, their opponents were also Scourge, and they were even stronger than them. Although the number of Scourge and the Scourge were similar, the Scourge and the Scourge used different tactics to attack the Scourge. When a Scourge was in a stalemate with the enemy, the other Scourge would launch a sneak attack from behind. Even Taifun could see that the right thing to do at this moment was to withdraw his sword and retreat. However, the Chief Justice could not control the 10 Scourge at the same time. Once the Scourge and the Scourge were in a stalemate, the disadvantage of the God's Punishment Army would become obvious. Even a transcendent warrior would lose his ability to fight once he was cut in half. Soon, all 10 Scourge fell, while the Scourge remained unscathed. Ellington, the leader of the group, easily cut down the Chief Justice. He raised his sword and placed it on the shoulder of the old Archbishop, who could no longer move. The blue blood of the Chief Justice mixed with the scarlet blood of the Chief Justice and dripped into Ellington's collar along the blade. You can't kill me, Taifun said in a trembling voice. If I die, the holy city will completely collapse. Who will stop the demonic beasts from wreaking havoc? If they break through the defense line of Hermes, I'm afraid the 4 kingdoms will fall into ruin. You can use these words to deceive those ignorant believers outside, but you'd better save your energy in front of me. We all know what the demonic beasts are looking for. If you hadn't brought them here, how could those brainless idiots have been so eager to dive into this snow trap during the months of demons, when the magic power is at its peak? No. I don't understand you, what? It seems like you haven't even seen the relic before. Scourge, who had the same face as Ellington, shrugged. What a pity. Tayfun was just about to say something when he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. A numbness and coldness instantly took over his consciousness. Elena kicked the old man's head into the air. Watching the old man's body fall down slowly, she withdrew her sword in satisfaction. Let's go. It's time to get down to business. Wait, you're hurt. Someone pulled her from behind. Stop the bleeding first, or your body will lose control. Where is the wound? There's a crack in your waist. You have to take off your armor. This damned body doesn't feel anything at all. Elena cursed. She untied the 2 pieces of armor fixed on the front and the back, revealing her strong upper body. TSK, TSK. Look at this body. It's worth at least 50 golden dragon in tequila. Someone interrupted. Honestly, have you ever looked in the mirror? Come on, Betty. What's the difference between fantasy and torture? The person who was helping Elena to stop the bleeding interrupted. I don't even dare to recall the days in tequila. Every time I think of my life at that time, it's no different from being imprisoned in a cage of nothingness. Carol's right. Someone immediately agreed. If anyone can give me a taste of a man again, I'll do anything to marry him. No, I'll even worship him as my master. A man? I'll be satisfied as long as I can eat a delicious buttered steak. I want to bask in the sun. Damn it. Who brought up this topic? Miss Betty. I just said it casually. I also wanted this body in the beginning. Stop. Elena roared angrily. The others are still waiting for us at the top of the tower. Concentrate. Don't forget the purpose of our trip. After Carol finished treating the wound, she took the lead and went into the secret passage. Following the narrow stone steps, they came to the library. Another group of witches was already waiting in the room, although they all looked like God's punishment army. They were the last remaining witnesses of the union. Elena sighed in her heart. Lady Natalia, have you seen this? She thought. We won in the end. Have you found the location of the relic? The same place. Zoe, the leader of the other team, came up. The decorations here are exactly the same as in the holy city of Tequila. By the way, why did it take you so long? You didn't let anyone go, did you? Of course, everything went well. Elena coughed twice. Then according to the agreement. We'll touch the relic together. She nodded. In that case, let's start. The relic of the gods was the root of the battle of divine will and the Union's top secret. In fact, before the fall of the Witch Empire, they did not know the existence of the relic. It was not until they hid in the underground maze and the original order was completely disintegrated that the survivors learned everything from the 3 chiefs. From then on, there was no hierarchy among the witches. Everyone was an equal individual. In order to find a way to resist the demons, all the survivors were equally important. Elena's heart beat faster when she thought that she was about to touch the relic. She knew it was just an illusion. She followed Zoe into a secret door hidden behind a bookcase and went all the way up to the top of the library. At the end of the passage was a narrow room without windows. There was nothing except the magic stone emitting a faint blue light above the ceiling. Is this the prayer room that Pasha mentioned? That's right. Zoe took out an iron hammer and smashed it hard on the wall. With a muffled sound, there was only a shallow white spot left on the wall. Looks like it's not here. She changed her position and continued to swing the iron hammer. After several attempts, a crack appeared on the wall facing the entrance. Found it. Help me. Elena took out her long sword and walked up to the wall. With one hammer and the other pry, she soon tore open a gap that was half the height of a person. Behind the wall was not the deep underground cave where the pivotal secret temple was located, but an even narrower secret chamber. From the broken section of the wall, it could be seen that it was almost half the width of an arm. Both sides of the wall were covered with thick mortar. It was impossible to tell the difference by ordinary knocking methods. Chapter 689. It was a transparent crimson crystal, very similar to the magic core in the ruins of the maze. It was also a vertical spindle. However, it was much smaller, only about half the height of a person. However, when Elena entered the secret chamber, she found that the back of the relic had changed its shape from a soft and smooth arc to a sharp right angle. Looking down from the top of the relic, it looked like a quarter of a circle that had been cut by a cross. Like the magic core, it was floating in the air without any support, which was enough to prove its extraordinariness. Is this the thing that decides the fate of human beings? Elena was full of doubts, but at the same time, she felt indignant towards the gods. According to Pasha, no one knew how the relic appeared in front of people. From the moment it appeared, it had been firmly connected with the fate of human beings. If it was lost, everyone, including witches and common people, would die instantly. In order to protect the relic, countless people had fought bloody battles and died on the battlefield against the demons. However, the gods had never given them any instructions, as if they were just silently enjoying everything until the final winner was born. This kind of trick was disgusting. Are you ready? Zoe asked. When moving the relic, don't empty your mind, and don't try to connect with the gods. Do you remember what Pasha told us? Don't worry. I remember. Elena nodded. I'll count to 3. What do you think? Pasha made a gesture of, yes. 3, 2, 1. The two held the relic and walked out slowly. Although it could float in the air, it was not as light as a goose feather. When Elena touched it, she felt her arms sink. Even though she was a member of the gods' punishment army, she still felt very tired. If Pasha had not told her, she would have thought that she had regained her senses that she had lost for hundreds of years. This feeling of fatigue was spiritual. The relic was trying to connect with them. Elena shook her head. She wanted to get rid of the distracting thoughts, but she suddenly realized that she could not empty her mind. In this case, she had to let her imagination run wild. What should she think about? A man, or delicious food, or a soft bed? What you want is feeling. A voice suddenly crept into her mind. Comfort, pleasure, pain, coldness, and heat. And I can give you these. Relax your mind and look at me. What are you looking at? No, that's not right. Elena's eyes widened. Who's talking? Could it be the relic itself? She turned to look at Zoe, only to find that the latter's eyes had already lost their luster, like a shell without a soul. Damn it, what was going on? Pasha didn't say that such an accident would happen. Don't worry, she's just following her heart's desire and fusing with me. Let her out. I can't do it. Or you can come in and take her out. The voice gradually changed from a hoarse voice to a soft female voice. Elena couldn't even tell whether the relic was talking to her or she was talking to herself. Take her out? For a moment, Pasha's advice flashed through her mind. Never connect with the gods. But she couldn't just watch Zoe disappear. A body that had completely lost its soul couldn't stay active for long. She had to pull Zoe back. Just look at the relic. Elena took a deep breath and stared at the crimson crystal. The latter's outline twisted, and then she was shrouded in darkness. When her sight returned to normal, she found that the world around her had completely changed. It was an indescribably spacious hall, infinitely high and infinitely far. The dome was a deep starry sky and a huge crimson moon. The magic power on the surface of the crimson moon was like boiling lava. 4 huge paintings fell quietly, surrounding her in the center. The hall, the crimson moon, and the paintings all gave people a sense of extreme magnificence. Although she had heard of such an incredible scene from Pasha, it was the first time for Elena to see it with her own eyes. Zoe! Where are you? She shouted. But no one answered her. There was nothing in the hall except the paintings. She forced herself to calm down and looked at the paintings. However, after only one glance, Elena felt cold sweat on her back. Someone was also watching her in the paintings. One of them was a demon in exquisite armor. Its pupils were shining with terrifying red light. It stood up from the throne and walked toward her step by step. The other painting was of a huge eyeball. What was terrifying was that there wasn't only one pupil in the eyeball. Instead, there were several pupils that bloomed at the same time in a triangular formation. Every single one of them was like a big mouth that was about to devour someone. She couldn't help but take 2 steps back. She encouraged herself in her heart, it's just a moving painting. There's nothing to be afraid of. However, this thought only lasted for less than a breath's time. Suddenly, 6 or 7 black tentacles stretched out of the 2 paintings and lunged at her. At the front of each tentacle, there was a small palm. Before Elena could react, she was caught red-handed. The tentacles dragged her back and forth, refusing to give in to each other, as if she were a rare trophy. Hanging between the 2 paintings, Elena felt that her body was about to be torn apart. The unbearable pain made her scream out loud. Wait, pain? Not until then did she realize that she had returned to the appearance of a witch. Unexpectedly, the last experience before death was to be pulled in half. Elena felt the sharp pain in her mind and her consciousness became blurred. That's good, at least I don't have to die empty-handed as a god's punishment warrior. However, the scene in the 3rd painting seemed to be a little different. She saw the body of the god's punishment warrior she had chosen fell on the ground and Zoe was dragging her to the secret door. What happened? Didn't I merge with the relic at all? At this moment, the hall suddenly fell apart. The crimson moon, the painting, and the tentacles all disappeared without a trace. The long-lost pain also stopped. Elena blinked her eyes and realized that she was back in the library. Is this a dream? What dream? You really piss me off. Zoe gnashed her teeth. What did Pasha tell you before? Don't connect with God. I clearly emphasized it to you in the beginning. But I saw you lose your mind. I also saw you being swallowed by the relic. She interrupted angrily. That's just an illusion created by God. If I hadn't dragged you out of the room, I'm afraid you would have been trapped in there forever. Elena could not help but think of the demon and the giant eye in the huge painting, as well as the tentacles. Were they all illusions created by God? She vaguely felt that something was wrong. Pasha had never really touched the relic, so it was normal that she did not mention it. However, she had personally felt everything shown in the relic. It was not an illusion at all, and it had nothing to do with God. The moment she noticed the person in the painting also noticed her. What should we do next? Betty interrupted. Chapter 690. After nearly half a month of sailing, the sailboat finally sailed into the western region. After passing Willow Town, the north wind blowing over the river suddenly became much stronger. Even lying in the cabin, number 76 could hear the sound of the sails being pulled. It's snowing outside. Amy excitedly ran into the cabin with a cluster of snowflakes in her hands and handed it to number 76. But before she could show it, the snowflakes had melted into crystal water droplets. It's white everywhere. It's the first time I've seen such heavy snow. Number 76 struggled to sit up on the soft bed. Really? It rarely snows in the city of Glow in the Kingdom of Dawn. But Tequila never lacked snow. She thought, the months of demons always come on time, and it's troublesome to clean up the snow for several months. Fortunately, during this period, the demons would slow down their attack, which made the white world look a little more lovely. I know. The city of Glow is like spring all year round. Amy's eyes curved into a crescent moon. Do you want to go to the deck and have a look? I can carry you. Stop it. Broken Sword, who was boiling herbs, stopped number 76. She hasn't recovered yet, so she can't stand the cold wind. Ah, sorry. It's okay. Number 76 shook her head. When I recover, I'll accompany you to enjoy the snow. Okay. His Majesty's city is closer to the west than here, so there must be a lot of beautiful snow scenes. As soon as she said that, the two people beside the bed showed a sad look, but Amy quickly recovered and nodded. Well, then it's a deal. Number 76 knew why they were sad. God's punishment soldiers had a strong recovery ability. Skin wounds that did not hurt the internal organs could heal themselves after 3 or 4 days of rest. In order not to expose herself, she personally crushed her thigh bones and elbow joints into powder. As a result, no matter how strong this body was, it could not completely recover to its original state. But in the eyes of outsiders, it was already very lucky that she could survive such an injury. If there were no witches with healing ability in the western region, she would forever lose the ability to move and spend the rest of her body in pain. For number 76, this body was just a tool to complete the task. As long as she could return to the underground maze, she could change into a new one at any time. As it turned out, the story she made up had an excellent effect. Annie was full of guilt for her serious injuries, which could be seen from her eyes and actions. The other witches, on the other hand, were full of trust and gratitude, especially Amy, who was also a fugitive from black money. They almost stuck together with her. Even at night, Amy would stay by her side and tell her folk stories to coax her to sleep. Even though this lively little girl was always the first to fall asleep. Gaining the witch's trust was what number 76 wanted. Only in this way could she make friends with more witches and find the chosen one that Pasha had mentioned. It's time to change the dressing. Broken Sword walked to the bedside with the earthen jar. It may be a little painful. It's better to close your eyes. I can bear it. You change it. Number 76 clenched her teeth and pretended to be strong. In fact, if she did not stare at Broken Sword, she would not know whether Broken Sword had started to change the dressing or not. In that case, how could she cooperate with Broken Sword? The decocted herbs were like a mass of sticky mud. Judging from the looks of Amy and Broken Sword, the smell of the mud must not be very pleasant. It was really hard for them to insist on applying this stuff all over her wounds in the narrow and enclosed cabin. After a while, number 76 let out a long sigh and lay back on the pillow, sweating profusely. By increasing her heartbeat, she could raise her body temperature, speed up her blood flow, and secrete sweat at the same time. Coupled with her slightly trembling limbs and expression, no one could tell that she was faking. As for whether the common people's formula was effective or not, it was not within her consideration. Thank you, number 76 said softly after a long time. No, this is what we should do. Amy picked up a towel and wiped the sweat on her forehead. We should thank you. Amy is right, Broken Sword comforted her. Have a good rest. When we arrive at Neverwinter, everything will be better. After the two left, number 76 pressed the colorful magic stone ring hidden in her chest and sighed slightly. Only by finding the chosen one could everything really get better. If they could not resist the demons, everyone would die. No one could escape from the battle of divine will, which would decide their fate. However, it was still unknown whether the chosen one existed or not. According to the remaining documents in the ruins of the maze, magic power was a gift from the gods to the extraordinary. Every creature that could use magic power must have a key that could open the source of magic power. This explained why magic power was everywhere, but only a few people could use it. But everyone's key is different. Some witches could set off storms and bring people back to life, while others could only heat a bowl or two of oatmeal or mend torn clothes. They were all awakened witches, but why was there such a huge gap between them? This question had troubled the Union for hundreds of years. It was not until further research on the records in the ruins did the surviving witches get a vague explanation. It was the key itself that caused all this. It had nothing to do with the capacity of magic power, but involved the essence of magic power. Every time a witch used her ability, she would transform part of the magic power into reality. This process was extremely complicated and could not be undertaken by witches, so the gods took the corresponding transformation steps. Not every witch could be equally favored by the gods, so some transformation was very simple, while others were very complicated. In other words, the complexity of the key determined the upper limit of a witch's ability. At first, number 76 found it hard to understand this statement until Pasha explained it with a simple example: magic stone. Even if their own magic cyclone remained the same, witches could still display a variety of effects through the magic stone, which showed that there was no difference in magic itself. Whether it was an extraordinary or a senior witch, they all used the same kind of power. In this case, if there was a kind of universal magic stone that could fulfill any wish, could it easily reverse the disadvantage of witches against the demons? The magic core was such a mechanism. It attempted to simulate the magic cyclone and directly draw power from the gods. In a sense, it could be seen as an artificial ultimate magic stone. The sigil that only involved the size of the magic power was like a simple and crude toy in front of it. However, experiments showed that the gods would not give the key to inanimate objects. To activate it, a witch with a matching key was needed. Chapter 691. With the help of the colorful magic stone ring, number 76 could observe the witches' conversation with God when they used their magic power. It was like a faint orange light, connecting the witches with the vast sky. In fact, not only witches, but also demons and some hybrid demonic beasts should have the same orange light if the historical records were correct. God did not care about the world. Every time she thought of this, she would feel extremely worried. Compared with the endless number of demons, witches could not be regarded as a powerful group. They could not be inherited or cultivated, and they could only awaken by luck. Moreover, their magic power was far less than that of their enemies. Fortunately, the key was not something destined to be. They could change the key itself by awakening at a higher level, so as to obtain more power from God. Since leaving the Kingdom of Dawn, number 76 had observed the orange light of Amy, Annie, and Hero. Among the three, Hero was the strongest and Annie the weakest, but overall, there was not much difference. They were all about the thickness of a finger, which was far from the requirement of activating the instrument of divine retribution. She had reason to believe that the chosen one must be a senior witch. Suddenly, the cabin door was pushed open, and Yorko, the ambassador of Greycastle, came in. He raised his eyebrows and walked to the bedside. The smell of this herb is even worse than a latrine pit. How did they use such a smelly thing as medicine? Maybe the crew thought that the demonic plague would also retreat in the face of this stench. Number 76 smiled reluctantly. But my body is really much better. At least the scratches have formed scabs. Of course, it was not the medicine, but the extraordinary bodies of the gods' punishment army. If it doesn't work, I'll definitely press their heads into the latrine pit so that they can smell the medicine I made. Yorko picked a bench and sat down. Poor sailors, she said softly. I heard from Amy that you asked them if there was any special prescription. Ahem, it's a felony to deceive the nobles. They asked for it. The ambassador spread out his hands. If you really can't answer, you can say that you take it with hot water and honey. Even if it doesn't cure the wound, at least the patient can leave with a satisfied smile. Ah, I'm not talking about you. Number 76 could not help but raise the corner of her mouth. During the long voyage, the ambassador would come to visit her once a day. Although the time was short, they had a pleasant conversation. She found that Yorko might be a mortal without any good points, but he was more humorous than most of the nobles when it came to women. Even in Tequila, he should not be a nobody. Since she had lost most of her senses, verbal communication was one of the few pleasurable pastimes she had. After chatting idly for a while, the man uncharacteristically fell silent. No. 76 thought for a while, propped herself up with one hand and asked tentatively, Your Excellency, do you need me to serve you? Although my body is not very agile, but... I've told you many times, you're no longer my maid. Don't mention serving anyone you meet. You're now a free citizen of Greycastle, understand? Not to mention, you're still injured. I'm not one of those upper-class nobles with sick hobbies. Then do you have something to tell me? Hearing this, Yorko's expression changed slightly. He cleared his throat and said, I do have a question to ask you. After arriving at the new king's city, what do you plan to do in the future? Well, go to a tavern to be a maid? Or a casino? Number 76 tilted her head and said, if the witches can really cure this body. As long as she could stay in Neverwinter, she did not mind doing anything. She had already established a relationship with the witches of the Kingdom of Dawn, and sooner or later she would get to know other members of the Witch Union. You should do something else, Yorko advised. Since you've already come out, don't go back to the old way. But black money didn't teach me anything other than serving men. Even if I want to be a guard, my limbs won't be as agile as before after I've reattached them. Neverwinter will teach you. I heard from His Majesty that his city can provide a formal job for everyone. Yorko paused for a moment. If you encounter any difficulties, you can come to me at any time, as long as I haven't left the western region. Did he hesitate for so long just to say this? Number 76 could not help feeling a little emotional. When she was in the Kingdom of Dawn, she clearly knew how much the ambassador hated trouble. It was probably very difficult for him to make such a promise. Well, I'll try. She lowered her head and said, thank you. 4 days later, the sailor brought good news. They had finally arrived at the new city in the western region of Greycastle, Neverwinter. All the witches gathered in number 76's room and waited anxiously for further instructions. Among them, Annie was the most anxious. From time to time, she opened the window and glanced at the dock. If she found anything wrong, she would take everyone and jump into the cold river without hesitation. The first thing number 76 felt was the noise. The high-pitched horn sounded continuously, and the river splashed against the side of the ship, as if there were countless ships passing in front and behind them. It was the months of demons. How could the dock be as busy as midsummer? Unfortunately, she could not move at the moment and could not see the scene outside the window. Sister Annie, why can't I see any sails on those ships? Amy asked in surprise. Maybe some sailors are paddling under the deck. Annie suddenly stopped and leaned sideways to the window. Quiet. Someone is coming. Are there many people? Broken Sword asked nervously. Only 4 people. They don't look like they're here to catch us. Annie frowned. And they're all women. All witches. Amy stood up at once. I knew Mr. Ambassador didn't lie to us. The members of the Blood Fang Association are also witches, but they're not our kind, she said in a low voice. Anyway, just follow my eyes and gestures as before. Okay. Everyone nodded in unison. Soon, the door of the cabin was knocked. The 4 people mentioned by Annie walked into the room one by one. The red-haired woman, who was the leader, said with a smile, "Welcome to Neverwinter, sisters from afar." Annie was stunned, probably because she did not expect the other party to be so enthusiastic. Even number 76 was quite surprised. Even in the tequila, where witches held great power, they would not welcome new awakened witches so casually. Didn't they distinguish the witch's abilities first? Comparing a combat witch to a non-combat witch was a very rude thing to do. Chapter 692. Number 76 pretended to be a little timid and slightly turned her head away. If she wanted to establish a relationship with the Witch Union, she would definitely be investigated by them. She was prepared for this. No one knew the abilities of witches better than the Union. It was normal for a large organization to have such investigative means as perception magic and stone of insight. If she could not even hide this from them, she would not have come all the way to the western region of Greycastle. Different from the God's Punishment Army who had lost their mind, she could easily control all parts of her body in her complete body. She could also control the withdrawal and release of the anti-magic field. Any witch could master this skill after 2 or 3 years of practice. As long as she did not trigger the magic power to distort the barrier, she looked no different from an ordinary person. After all, Scourge's anti-magic field and blue blood were caused by magic power. Without consciousness, he was like a beast and could only rely on the instinct of a transformed person to fight. Naturally, he did not know how to use the omnipresent magic power. When the witch's soul entered her body could be considered to be fully utilized. Although she could no longer condense magic cyclones like before, and her fighting instincts would also disappear completely, her immortal soul could, through years and years of training, make her possess strength and skills not inferior to that of an extraordinary. "Aren't you going to ask us about our abilities first?" Annie asked after a while. It was obvious that she was on high alert. Number 76 was also interested in this question. Along the way, she had a deeper understanding of the experience of Annie and her team. She heard that due to the lack of ability, this witch was rejected by an organization that only accepted combat witches and was almost sold to the nobles by them. Number 76 could understand why the combat witches were held in such high regard, especially when the wild witches were being suppressed by Starfall City. It was necessary for them to protect themselves and the organization to maintain their continuity. But it could also be seen that these witches' understanding of magic power was still at the initial level. Because of the existence of high awakening, some non-combat witches could get earth-shaking changes after promotion. Their seemingly useless abilities could undergo transcendental qualitative changes. Therefore, the Blood Fang Association not only refused to take in non-combat witches, but also sold them to the nobles, which was extremely stupid. But it was strange to say that she didn't care about her ability at all. It could be said that she had gone from one extreme to the other. After all, the probability of a high-level awakening was always small. There were many witches who couldn't be promoted in their lifetime, not to mention that combat witches also had the opportunity to be promoted. Therefore, in any case, it was a fact that combat witches had a higher status. Their practice of treating all witches equally was inconceivable to number 76. It was no wonder that Annie was so wary. "The ability test is usually scheduled for 3 days later," the red-haired witch said with a soft smile. "After all, you've been rushing all the way and must be exhausted. It's more accurate to wait until you've had enough rest before taking the test. What do you think? By the way, I'm Vendi, the person in charge of the Witch Union. If you have any questions in the future, you can ask me." Annie's expression still didn't relax. What if the test results show that our abilities are useless? Both His Majesty and the Witch Union agree that there is no useless ability, the witch who called herself Vendi replied gently. "I know what you're worried about. This is also the process that most witches will go through when they join Neverwinter. In fact, the ability test is just to let His Majesty know more about you. It doesn't mean that you have to become a member of the Union." Annie was stunned. "What do you mean?" "It means that even if you don't want to serve His Majesty, you can still live like ordinary people in this city." This sentence made number 76's heart skip a beat. She knew that the emergence of a high level which largely depended on a relaxed environment. For example, in Tequila, every witch could use her ability at will, and those with a little potential would be specially trained by the Union. The more the holy city was dominated by witches, the more high-level witches would be promoted. How could a witch, who had to flee from place to place and lived in constant fear, who rarely had the chance to practice her abilities, be promoted? If what Vendi said was true, that Neverwinter could allow witches to live a free and stable life, in a sense, it had met the conditions for the birth of high-level witches. Maybe they don't have the chosen one now, but what about a few years later? Number 76 thought. Maybe it would be best to find a chance to talk to the Witch Union in private and develop them into a branch of the Union. We don't have to serve the king. Annie seemed to be unable to believe her ears. Yes, the Witch Union won't force any of our sisters to sign a contract. It's just that becoming a member of the Union will give us a lot of benefits and the work will be easy, so everyone has joined this big family. I'm sorry, Lady Vendi. Broken Sword said, can you tell us what a witch's job is? Don't call me lady. Vendi shook her head with a smile. We're sisters, aren't we? As for the job, it's related to one's own ability. For example, Miss Evelyn, who can make good wine, has opened a winery in the city. Miss Mystery Moon, who can make objects magnetic, is responsible for the lighting of all the factories. And Miss Nana Pine, her outstanding healing ability has made her the angel girl of Neverwinter. I heard from Mr. Ambassador that you need healers, right? Number 76 could not help but frown. Don't they care about the difference between witches' abilities? How did the king of Grey Castle defeat the god's punishment army of the church? Can you really cure heroes' feet? Amy's voice suddenly became excited. We'll know after Nana tries it. Vendi nodded to the blonde witch. But before that, can you introduce your origins and names? Number 76 did not care whether she could be cured or not. Her attention was focused on the four witches. The colorful magic stone on her chest was slightly hot, which proved that someone was using magic power. She realized that the examination had begun. From Annie to Hero, everyone gave a brief account of their past. During this period, Vendi also asked several questions, and an older black-haired witch recorded the content in the handbook. During this period, the magic stone was kept at the same temperature. When the questioning was over, Vendi looked at number 76. You're not a witch. She's our friend, Amy said. If she hadn't stalled the pursuers of the Kingdom of Dawn, we would have been caught and sent back to the dungeon. I used to be a guide, or a maid, of the underground exhibition in the City of Glow. The Lord Emissary bought me from the Chamber of Commerce. Number 76 slowly said the pretext she had prepared. She had faintly sensed the way of the examination. Those questions were not asked casually, but had a clear purpose and an answer that could not be evaded. Some of them might be able to tell the lie. Number 76 was not worried about this. She could precisely control every part of her body and could also temporarily cut off the connection with a certain part. The subtle changes when lying did not exist for her. Unless the other party could directly invade her brain, her words would be impeccable. Her guess was proven right. After the answer, Vendi did not show any abnormality. I see. Thank you for saving them. If you have nowhere else to go, you might as well live with them in the Foreign Affairs building. Thank you, number 76 said gratefully. Chapter 693. Number 76 was a little surprised by her words. It seems that there is more than one examiner. However, 400 years of training had taught her how to hide her emotions. Moreover, as long as she thought of something, her body would be separated from her consciousness. It was difficult to make her reveal her flaws only by sudden questioning. Number 76 pretended to be surprised at first, and then reluctantly took out the ring from her robe. After a long hesitation, she said, I stole it from Black Money. At the same time, her evaluation of the witch union rose to another level. At first, she thought that their welcome was too casual, but now it seemed that was not the case. One witch could detect lies, and the other one had the ability to see through things. This was already considered prudent enough. Black Money? The witch with long green hair picked up the ring in her hand and carefully looked at it for a while. This seems to be a magic stone, but it doesn't look the same. Number 76 suddenly frowned in her heart. They even know about the existence of magic stones? This is a little troublesome. Although the way to activate it is not the same as ordinary magic stones, as long as you ponder it for a while, you will find its function sooner or later. She had to distract their attention. She did not have another magic stone. Black Money is the underground exhibition I used to stay in. There are often auctions of things excavated from ancient ruins. The boss often said that they have incredible power. The more novel something is, the more it will be popular among the buyers. In addition, they occasionally auction. What? Vendi asked. Auction witches, number 76 said in a low voice. Hearing this, undisguised anger appeared on the faces of the four witches, and they paid less attention to the ring. Obviously, they abhorred the sale of witches as slaves, which indirectly showed that the witch organization in Grey Castle would not agree with the practice of Starfall City. Number 76 didn't lie. I was almost auctioned to a noble by black money, Amy echoed. Fortunately, Mr. Ambassador saved me. They will get what they deserve sooner or later, the blonde witch said coldly. That ring. Number 76 pretended to be timid. Although Miss Agatha will definitely be very interested in this item, let's talk about it after you familiarize yourself with Neverwinter. The green-haired witch shrugged and did not intend to keep it for herself. She put the ring back into Agatha's hand. Number 76 was slightly stunned. Agatha? This name sounded quite familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. I promise you won't encounter such a thing again. Vendi comforted them. No one in Neverwinter will dare to do anything to you. His Majesty firmly believes that the era of witches and ordinary people living together will come soon. At that time, not only in the western region of Grey Castle, but also in the whole kingdom, no one will regard you as the devil's minions. Will there really be such a day? Broken Sword asked doubtfully. Of course, the Witch Union was established for this purpose. Vendi smiled. Anyway, let me take you to a place to rest first. Number 76 was slowly moved to a stretcher and was carried out of the cabin by the sailors. The moment she left the sailboat, she finally saw the full view of the dock. The heavy snow did not make the city quiet. Dozens of people lined up along the dock, sweeping the snow on the ground. Further away were the strange cargo ships that docked to unload cargo. Just as Amy had said, they did not have tall masts and sails, but they could come and go freely in the river. Those ships don't seem to have oars. And why do they look like they are made of stone? The witches whispered to each other, and number 76 clearly saw a proud smile on Vendi's face. Even through the wind and snow, the smile still contained warmth. However, this was not the only place that greatly surprised number 76. As they entered the city, the scene of Neverwinter gradually appeared in front of her. This new king city was different from the mortal cities or the holy city of the Union that she had seen. The wide and solid streets were as straight as a black vertical line. The snowflakes that kept falling did not affect the traffic at all. The accumulated snow was piled on both sides of the road in an orderly manner, looking like small white mounds of dirt. Apparently, the big trees planted for the sake of beauty were neatly arranged, and colorful ribbons were hung on the bare trunks. She could imagine that in midsummer, the city should be green like a carpet, and the interlaced branches above her head formed a natural sunshade. Square brick houses stood side by side, almost of the same size. Apart from that, number 76 did not see a single bungalow or shabby thatched hut. Although it was already the months of demons, there were still many figures walking in the snow in the city. Many people would stop and nod to greet the black-haired witch when they passed by them. Their expressions were sincere and enthusiastic, not at all like they were forced to do so due to the oppression of power. This was what she cared about the most. This was the first time that she had witnessed witches and mortals coexisting as equals. Although she had heard that witches and mortals had a period of non-interference during the first battle of divine will, that was, after all, something that happened 800 or 900 years ago. Moreover, this city seemed to be going one step further. Instead of living separately, they were integrated into one. His Majesty believes that the era of witches and mortals living together will soon come. Number 76 suddenly recalled Vendi's words in her mind. It turned out that it was not a joke. In Neverwinter, it seemed to be coming true. During the voyage of more than a month, number 76 had a certain understanding of Prince Roland of Grey Castle. From an unknown border lord to the king of a country, if it was just a low-level war between mortals in the beginning, then in the end, he defeated the church which had many gods' punishment army, which might prove his strength. Was all this related to the phenomenon in front of her? Number 76 almost wanted to sit up and take a closer look at the city if she did not have to pretend to be sick. According to Pasha, they would have to deal with mortals sooner or later. In order to defeat the demons, they could temporarily cover up the past of the Union. After all, they were facing a formidable enemy and could not easily leave the ruins of the maze. It was not easy to reverse the mess left by Starfall City in a short time. As long as the witches could survive, one day they would be able to restore the glory of Tequila. On this point, Lady Akasri and Lady Natalia had the same opinion. After arriving at the messenger's building, number 76 and Hero were carried back to the bed. The other three witches gathered around the blazing fireplace and excitedly talked about what they had seen and heard along the way. There was no doubt that Neverwinter had left a deep impression on them in such a short time. After a while, Vendi came into the room with a little girl. "This is Nana. Whether it's a new injury or an old one, she can heal them all. Even a broken leg?" Amy could not wait to run to the bed and uncovered the cotton blanket covering Hero. "No." The little girl stretched out her hand to try and slowly shook her head. "Unless you still keep her broken leg. If the whole limb is lost, I can only reattach it, but I can't regenerate it. Are you saying that we have to find her 2 new legs?" Chapter 694. Nana. Vendi glanced at her reproachfully. "I'm telling the truth. Not only did I reconnect the severed limbs, His Majesty also asked me to do many experiments, such as swapping the wings of a rooster and a gray eagle to see if the rooster could also fly. Also, the limbs of frogs and mice, the bodies of cows and sheep." The little girl said while counting on her fingers. The 4 witches sucked in a breath of cold air. Number 76, however, was very interested in her words. To fully study the mystery of the ability, instead of fearing and avoiding it, was obviously the style of a member of the Quest Society. No wonder His Majesty was willing to accept witches. From this point alone, at least he was not a stubborn and conservative person. "What's the result?" she could not help asking. Most of them failed at first, but after His Majesty asked Lily to join the experiment, the success rate increased a lot. But after the reconnection, the limbs basically lost their function, so I had to reconnect them again. Nana paused. "Ah. I forgot to tell you, these are all alien connections. If it's the same kind of animal, after the treatment, almost no difference can be seen. So if you have 2 legs, Ahem, please don't mind." Vendi covered the little girl's mouth. "As for the leg, we'll find a way to solve it. Although it will take some time, the hero will be able to stand up one day. You can rest assured." The witches looked at each other and did not dare to speak for a while. "Anyway, cure your friend's injury first." Vendi did not know whether to laugh or cry. She patted Nana's head and said, "Go." Number 76 hurriedly put on a complex expression, which was 30% expectation and 70% fear. She watched the little girl walk to her side and press her hands on the broken leg. The ring on her chest heated up again. She suddenly realized that she had encountered a troublesome problem. That was, what kind of expression should she show when receiving treatment? Number 76 did not know how her body would feel when healing the broken bones and joints with magic power. Would it be painful or relaxing? Or would there be no feeling at all? Should she scream or gritted her teeth and moan? Before she could think of an answer, the little girl withdrew her hands. "Your leg is healed. Next is your arm." She tried to lift the broken leg and found that it could move freely. After a while, the twisted elbow also returned to normal. "Your spirit is very good." Nana looked at her strangely. Most people, after recovering from a serious injury, will fall into a deep sleep, not even yawning. "You are the first." Number 76's heart sank. She pretended to be at a loss and replied, I just. But sleeping is just a natural reaction of the body. There won't be any harm even if you wake him up immediately. You don't have to worry. If you haven't been active for a long time, you might not be used to it at first, but you'll be fine after 2 days. Is that so? Thank you. Fortunately, the blonde witch who served as the examiner was not here. Number 76 secretly glanced at Vendi and found that Vendi was not paying attention to her but was chatting with Hero. She was slightly relieved. Are you really better? Amy asked with concern. Number 76 raised her broken right hand and waved at her. Yes, I've recovered. Miss Nana's ability is really incredible. Seeing this scene, the worries in the eyes of the other witches dissipated a lot. Amy gritted her teeth and walked to Wendy's side. She pulled her sleeve and said, "Please use my leg to heal Hero." What? Wendy was obviously stunned. My ability is self-healing. If I cut off my legs, they might grow back. No, Amy, don't. Hero hurriedly said, "You've suffered minor injuries before. What if they can't grow back?" "I'm willing to try," she insisted. Annie, persuade her. Amy, don't say any more. Even if you help Hero stand up, she will feel uncomfortable for a long time. But... Well, you don't have to fight, Nana suddenly said. Maybe there is another way to cure her legs. Everyone turned to look at her in unison. I'm 16 years old this year and will be an adult in 2 years. After adulthood, my ability will be greatly strengthened. Maybe I can directly regrow the whole severed limb. She pursed her lips. There's also ability evolution. If you can achieve the level of Sister Anna and Sister Leaf, maybe you can grow 2 more legs. Ability evolution? What's that? Amy's eyes widened. It's when the magic power in the body condenses and becomes a new appearance. Haven't you seen it? Nana said proudly. Anyway, it's very powerful. As long as you study hard, you will also have the opportunity to evolve new abilities. Listening to the little girl's excited narration, number 76 was shocked. If she understood correctly, the evolution mentioned by Nana was higher awakening. But she also felt like she was listening to a fairy tale. There were several senior witches in the Witch Union, and all of them appeared in the last 2 years. How could this be possible? Senior witches were not like wheat planted in the farmland, where the number of seeds sown would be the same. Every promoted awakened was a valuable asset of the Union. Talent, diligence, and luck were indispensable. Even number 76 was just an ordinary combat witch before she was transformed into Scourge. Why did Nana think that most people could evolve? As long as they studied hard, they could evolve new abilities. This kind of talk was simply nonsense. Although the more experiences one had, the more knowledge one had, and the more likely one was to have an epiphany, it was only a 1 in 1,000 chance. If it was so simple, how could the Union encounter a low period in which no one had advanced for nearly 100 years, and become exhausted in the second half of the Battle of Divine Will? But, in front of a group of wild witches who had never even heard of higher awakening, was it necessary for Nana to lie? If it were not for her identity as an ordinary person, she really wanted to ask the little girl the truth on behalf of Annie and the others. At least it was certain that there were senior witches in the Witch Union, otherwise Nana would not have made such a clear and logical statement. But the number of senior witches should be an exaggeration, or some powerful people were the higher-ups of the Union and had little contact with the new witches, so the little girl, who should have just awakened, mistook some of the higher-ups for promoted witches. Thinking of this, number 76 felt very excited. Chapter 695. Dinner was served by the servant. Before she even opened the lid, Annie could already smell the mouth-watering aroma. Inside the metal box was a thick stack of bread that had been baked to a golden color. It was obvious that it was made from peeled wheat flour that had been kneaded and fermented. In addition, there was a small bag of butter and a pot of broth, enough for 5 people to enjoy. The spoons and dishes are in the wooden cabinet in the cupboard. Breakfast will be delivered tomorrow, so you don't have to keep food overnight, the servant said methodically. Please don't leave the Foreign Affairs building before you get an official resident ID card. In addition, the basement is forbidden. If you want to practice your ability, you can go to the rooftop. There's a service room on the 1st floor. I'll sleep there. If you need anything, please come to me at any time. Unlike the hotel, all services here are free. The 5 people were stunned and did not come to themselves for a while until the servant bowed and left. Is this how great nobles entertain people? It's exactly the same as in a play. Amy was the first to exclaim. But the lines are wrong. For example, Broken Sword and Hero asked curiously. Like, Your Excellency, I'm honored to serve you, and so on, they usually start like this. We're not nobles. Of course, he won't say that. Number 76 chuckled. Anyway, let's eat first. I'm starving. You're right. Everyone swallowed their saliva. Oh no, is this the honey attack of the King of Greycastle? Annie was worried. It seemed to be a move to rope them in, but the person in charge of the Witch Union did not even ask about their abilities. This contradictory move made it difficult for her to judge the other party's intention. It would be fine if she was alone, but now she had 4 companions. She had to be more cautious and could not make the same mistakes as before. There was no doubt that the safest way was to stay away from the western region. The church had been destroyed and the biggest enemy was gone. As long as they could find a village or a small town near a big city, they could hide their identities and live, just like in the Kingdom of Dawn. Unfortunately, this method did not work now. Watching number 76 stagger to the table, Annie could not help sighing. In any case, the Witch Union did have the ability to heal the disabled, and the prospects described were quite tempting. Now that she had seen the light of hope for the hero to stand up again, she naturally couldn't just leave with the 4 of them. Forget it, I'll fill my stomach first. When Annie put a piece of buttered bread into her mouth, she immediately felt an unprecedented soft and fragrant sweetness fill her mouth. The bread was so smooth that there was not a single grain of grit in it. It flowed easily into her throat without much chewing. Damn it, this honey's attack is a little too fierce. Although she was thinking this, she found that her hand had already uncontrollably moved to the next piece. For a moment, apart from the sounds of eating and drinking, no one spoke in the room. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when there were only a few scraps left in the metal box. Will we still be able to eat this kind of food in the future? Broken Sword reluctantly sucked every finger. I don't think that's possible. Amy picked up the soup pot and poured the fragrant broth evenly into 5 bowls. There were still some green onions and circles of oil floating on the golden broth, making it look particularly tempting. This kind of bread should be something that only upper-class nobles can afford to eat. My father only eats coarse bread the most. It's already very good to have coarse bread to eat. Don't forget that when we first arrived in the Kingdom of Dawn, it was difficult to fill our stomachs. Hero blew at the hot air, impatiently took a long sip, and then exhaled a breath of warm air from her mouth. Her low voice was full of long-lost satisfaction. Lady Vendy said that there are many benefits to joining the Witch Union. I wonder if it includes food. Before she left, she said that she would take us to visit Neverwinter and the Witch Union tomorrow. Let's ask her then. I hope so. Listening to her companions talking about the possible benefits of the Witch Union, Annie had a faint premonition that they might stay in this city for a long time. After taking a bath, they climbed into bed early. The house consisted of a living room and 4 bedrooms. The 5 witches discussed and quickly decided on who to sleep in. As the strongest witch, Annie naturally chose to sleep in the same bed with Hero, whose life was extremely inconvenient. The bed was very soft and did not have a musty smell. Obviously, it was often cleaned here. There were only a few small flames left in the fireplace. The flickering dim light reflected the furnishings in the room on the white stone walls. The black shadows swayed gently as if dancing with the howling cold wind outside the window. She carried Hero to bed and then blew out the candles. Hero squeezed into her arms and said softly, "It's been almost a year since we left the Kingdom of Wolfheart, right?" "Yes. If you count from the day we arrived at the border of the Kingdom of Dawn, it's nearly a year and 2 months." Annie nodded. "How long has it been since we left our hometown?" This question made her fall into silence. In fact, Annie could not remember the specific time when she left her hometown. She only remembered that it was a remote village in the northwest of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. After her identity as a witch was exposed, she kept trekking eastward and covered more than half of the Kingdom of Wolfheart. It was not until she was betrayed by the Blood Fang Association that she stopped in the suburbs of King's City. It was the same for Broken Sword and Hero. They were forced to leave home for their own reasons and went through many hardships along the way. Finally, they met Annie in the kingdom of Wolfheart and escaped together. It's been almost 5 years, Hero said in a low voice. During these 5 years, I've been hiding from the church and haven't stopped for even a moment. When I was in King's City, I thought I finally didn't have to run anymore. I didn't expect that I would still have to run even if I lost my legs. Annie could not help hugging her a little tighter. Lady Vendy said, "This is the home of witches. Can we really settle down here?" Hero's voice was intermittent, like the faint sound of the wind outside the window. She seemed to be asking Annie, but also seemed to be talking to herself. "I don't want to wander around anymore." Annie suddenly felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Don't worry. We'll have a house of our own. You'll also get your legs back. You can go anywhere you want, not to run away, but to travel leisurely." "Is that so?" Hero paused for a long time. "If only I had been born in Grey Castle from the beginning." In the end, her voice was so soft that it could not be heard. When Annie opened her mouth and was about to say something, she heard the sound of even breathing. Chapter 696. After Roland fell asleep, Nightingale slipped into the mist and quietly left the castle. Her destination was the Foreign Affairs building. The dark ground shrouded in the night showed distinct black and white colors in the misty world. Using the twisted contour lines, she leaped several meters and crossed the garden wall in a few steps. Roland called this method of movement flash and said it was a magic skill with no cooldown time. Nightingale immediately fell in love with this name, moving like lightning, quiet like a shadow, suddenly appearing and disappearing, impossible to guard against. This was called the flash. However, she did not quite understand what the latter part of the phrase, cooldown time, meant. But this was also an old habit of His Majesty. After staying with him for a long time, she would always hear some incomprehensible words. After leaving the castle district, Nightingale did not go down the slope as usual. Instead, she directly leaped from the hillside and walked in the air along the lines that appeared in the sky. After a few steps, she directly landed on the top floor of the Foreign Affairs building. This building was built in the area between the castle district and the residential area. It was 4 stories high, which happened to be level with the small highland where the castle was located. It was also the second concrete building after the Witches' Building. The original purpose of its construction was to house some of the more important prisoners, such as Duke Ryan's wife and daughter, who were detained in the basement. Although they were prisoners, the environment of the new residence was much better than the previous dungeon, and they also had time to take a walk every day. In her opinion, this was simply too good for the nobles. Perhaps His Majesty felt that he might not have so many enemies to house, so the above-ground area became the first place for the distinguished guests who came to Neverwinter for the first time. For example, the sages of the Alchemist Society of King's City, the Astrology Association, and the sea merchants of the fjords had lived here for a while. Since the rooms in the Foreign Affairs building were empty most of the time, and it was far from the heating system of the residential area, only running water was available. Because the identity of the residents was more complicated, His Majesty also added a team of personal guards here, which not only showed the importance of the guests, but also served as a watchdog. Of course, Nightingale did not want to alert the guards by taking the stairs. She went straight through the top floor and entered the bedroom where the witches lived. The afternoon inspection did not find anything unusual. The 4 witches' magic cyclones were very stable, and their capacity was not outstanding. They could be regarded as the most common kind. As for the content of the questions and answers, there were basically no lies, only some ambiguities when it came to talking about their past experiences. Her branch ability had keenly captured the subtle insinuations, but this was very normal. Along the way, she had suffered hardships, hunted, and even more unspeakable treatment, which would become a shadow in the witch's heart that she was unwilling to mention, so it was normal for ordinary people to want to hide it. If only these 4 witches came to Neverwinter, then she would probably have 4 more sisters. However, what caught Nightingale's attention was the ordinary girl called number 76. There was no magic radiance on his body, and his demeanor was no different from an ordinary person, but she still felt that something was wrong. Later, when she thought about it, she found that what made her feel strange was number 76's honest answer. Nightingale had seen many people pour out everything they knew until they were facing death. However, it was rare for a former maid of the Underground Chamber of Commerce to be honest with a stranger without any threat. But she could not judge the identity of number 76 because of this reason. After all, number 76 did not lie. The fact that she did not lie meant that the experience and origin she talked about so far were credible. In addition, what Yorko, Amy, and Annie said could also be corroborated. Number 76 was indeed a guide of the Black Money exhibition. She was bought by Yorko because she was involved in the witch auction. Therefore, Nightingale decided to sneak into the Foreign Affairs building at night and observe number 76's behavior in the mist. If number 76 was really up to no good, this would also be the moment when she was most likely to show her flaws. She walked through the bedrooms one by one and soon found the room where number 76 was. The other witches had basically fallen asleep, but number 76's room was still lit up. She was sitting on the bed, playing with the ring in her hand by candlelight. Her eyes were full of joy and intoxication. Is it because of the beautiful gemstone inlaid on the ring? Nightingale walked to the bed and quietly watched number 76's every move. Except for admiring the ring over and over, number 76 did not do anything suspicious. She was like a lucky person who was too excited to sleep with a treasure in her hand. Although the ring was shining with a tiny magic radiance, it was not surprising that there was such a magic stone in the exhibition, considering that some relics were often auctioned in the exhibition. After an hour, number 76 was tired of admiring the ring, dropped her arms and closed her eyes. Nightingale sighed softly. It seems that I worry too much. She glanced at number 76 for the last time, reached out to extinguish the candlelight, turned around and walked through the wall into the howling wind and snow. The heat of the colorful magic stone subsided, which proved that the person who used the magic power had left the bedroom. Number 76 was a little relieved. Even if they could get almost unlimited life through the soul transfer, it did not mean that they could stay up all night. It was just that after disconnecting the connection between the soul and the body, the efficiency of resting was much higher than sleeping. Therefore, in a day, she only needed to rest for 2 to 4 hours to recover. Usually, she fell asleep much later than the witches. She didn't expect that it was this difference that allowed her to observe such an incredible scene. Number 76 opened her eyes and looked at the empty bedside. Just now, a column of bright orange light appeared in the room. The light column was as thick as a torso and went straight to the ceiling, reflecting the other side of the ring into a golden color. This level of ki had surpassed the remaining senior witch of Tequila, Pasha, and was only second to the 3 chiefs of the Union. Although she could not see the figure of the visitor, she knew that it was not a simple invisibility spell, but a much more complicated ability. Is the visitor Anna or Leaf who Nana mentioned? Although there was still a certain gap between the requirements of the Chosen One and the orange light, number 76 was excited to see such an orange light. The activation method of the colorful magic stone ring was very simple. As long as someone nearby was using the ability, the magic stone could absorb a small part of the surging magic power, thus showing the complexity of the ability. The specific manifestation was the light columns observed through the magic stone. The thicker the light column, the more complicated the key was. Number 76 became more excited as she thought about it. She simply walked out of the room and went to the top floor of the building. The wind and snow assaulted her face, yet she didn't feel the slightest bit of cold. If it was any other time, this feeling of emptiness and powerlessness would only make her feel tired. But now, she instead felt incomparably excited. She had a bold and unrestrained feeling of standing against the wind and chasing the last ray of light in the darkness. She raised the ring and pointed it in the direction of the castle. According to Vendi, the castle was where the witches lived. Now that the first senior witch had appeared, would the witch union give her more surprises? She was full of expectations. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. The ring in her hand suddenly trembled as if it was resonating with something. Chapter 697. How is this possible? Number 76 only felt a bang in her heart, and her whole body froze on the spot. There was a limit to the range in which the colorful magic stone could sense magic fluctuations. In theory, it was impossible to see the orange light phenomenon beyond 100 steps. She did not intend to observe anything at this distance. She just lifted the ring as she pleased, but why did this happen? After taking 2 deep breaths, she blinked and put the ring in front of her eyes again. The beam of light still did not disappear. What she saw was not an illusion, but a real scene. An indescribable excitement rushed into her mind, making her almost unable to control herself. Pasha, what kind of person is qualified to be called the chosen one? Do you see the edge of the ring? If the beam of light can fill the whole field of vision, then she is the chosen one we are looking for. That's too exaggerated. Even Lady Eleanor can only fill half of the field of vision. So that person's potential must exceed the 3 chiefs of the Union. I admit it's difficult, but we have no other way. Remember, the key doesn't represent the amount of magic power, nor does it equal to the level of combat power. So don't miss any which edge. Fill the field of vision. Fill the field of vision. No. Pasha, the miracle I saw is far more than that. Number 76 swallowed. Even if she put the ring in the position closest to her eyes, she still could not absorb the entire beam of light into the magic stone. Its width was beyond the boundary of her field of vision. She had to move the ring horizontally to be able to see the full view of this huge wall. God finally smiled at human beings. Lady Natalia, you're right. I found the chosen one. When Roland walked into the bathroom with a yawn, he saw Zero lying in front of the washstand, washing her face and rinsing her mouth. Well, where's the toothpaste? Here. The little girl moved aside and handed him a tube of toothpaste that was almost used up. Thanks. Roland fetched a glass of water and put the wet toothbrush into his mouth. Looking at the 2 people in the mirror, one tall and one short, squeezing in front of the narrow washstand and moving their elbows synchronously, he suddenly felt that this dream was full of joy. Zero spat out the foam in her mouth and rolled her eyes at him. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at your short stature. Roland replied in a nasal voice. Then, he was kicked in the shin. Remember to shave, or you'll look too old. She combed her white hair and began to tie it into a ponytail. Don't embarrass me today. Isn't it just a parent-teacher meeting? He sighed and rinsed his toothbrush. I'm not your real family. I'm just your agent. You don't have to be so formal. Moreover, he couldn't dress up even if he wanted to. The clothes in his wardrobe were all from street stalls. It would be good enough if he could dress up to look energetic. By the way, I still think you look better with your long hair down. Roland smacked his lips and said, even if you want to tie it up, a double ponytail is more suitable. None of your business. Then he was pushed out of the bathroom. It seemed that after the end of the summer, the little lass's temper had grown. Was it because he had indulged her too much? After entering and exiting the dream world many times, Roland had now mastered the trick of entering the dream world. In other words, when he did not want to enter the dream world, this strange dream would not appear. Of course, he wouldn't have any other dreams. Instead, he slept until dawn. In this way, he could more easily control the passage of time in the dream world. In the past 2 months, in addition to further exploring the holy city of Hermes, Roland's remaining work was to wander around in various libraries and search for books that still left an impression on him. In addition, he found that the strange power flowing in his body was still effective even in the memory fragments. Because of this, his adventure in the snowfield was much smoother than he had imagined. Using the climbing rope and the drilling machine he bought, he even went deep into the pivotal secret area under the cathedral to check. Although he did not find the prayer room that Isabella mentioned, the secret historical records and the research on magic stones in the library were an eye-opener for him. However, he could not use the secret passage in the pivotal secret area to go to the old holy city. Halfway through the passage disappeared without a trace, leaving only endless darkness and the red lightning at the end, as if the other end had been swallowed by the void. It seemed that Zero still had a strong will to resist when she was defeated, so the remaining memory fragments only remained in this narrow area of the new holy city. Relying on selling the armors moved out of the holy city, Roland's savings were increasing rapidly. Finally, the living room was air-conditioned, and the refrigerator was replaced with a bigger one. The living conditions in the apartment building had improved significantly. Of course, there were still some troubles. Previously, when he tried to rescue Zero, many passers-by had taken photos of him running on the street. Not only did the photos get uploaded to the internet, but they also appeared on the local news channel. Fortunately, no one had clearly taken a photo of his face, and he had disposed of the clothes as garbage in time, so Zero did not see any clues. As for who this suspected martialist was and why he appeared in public in such a casual singlet and shorts, it even caused a heated discussion on the internet. Regarding this, Roland's opinion was, "Ahem, I'm really sorry that I don't have money." Now that he finally did not have to worry about living, he naturally shifted his attention to the other residents. He wanted to know whether the same gate of fragment was hidden in these people's rooms. Apart from stealing and swindling, the easiest way was to use money to knock on their door. "I'm ready, uncle. Let's go to school." Zero finished dressing and walked up to him with her school bag on her back. Today was the 12th of September, the first day of the new semester, so parents were required to accompany them. Roland's eyes involuntarily lit up. She had changed into a black short-sleeved shirt, a pleated skirt that did not reach her knees, and a pair of white stockings and sneakers. She looked very youthful and lovely. Her soft white hair was tied into two ponytails that draped over her shoulders, and yellow hair ribbons hung down from both ends. Paired with her impeccable facial features, delicate and translucent skin, and light red eyes, she looked like a fairy that had walked out of a painting. Roland could not help but reach out and rub her head. "That's right. I just happened to want to tie my hair like this. It's not because of what you said. Yes, I know. It's true. I didn't say it's fake. Why do I feel that you're lying to me?" "That's because you think too much." Roland held back his laughter and pretended to be serious. "Let's go, or we'll miss the early bus." The content of the parent-teacher conference was just to sit in the back of the classroom and listen to the children's goals and promises for the new semester. Students at this age were not used to lying, so they always worked harder to achieve the goals they promised in front of their parents. Roland originally thought that this morning would pass peacefully, but he did not expect that the dream would be so unexpected. "Why is it you again?" A clear female voice rang in his ears. Chapter 698. Probably because she did not want to be recognized, she was wearing a checkered blouse, a pair of jeans, a pair of sunglasses, and a cap, which made her look very low-key. However, Prince Roland had such a deep impression of his third sister that he could immediately recognize her by her voice even if her face was covered up. Roland glanced at the note on the armrest to make sure that he was not sitting in the wrong position. He asked, "Why can't it be me?" Apparently, she had also seen the name on the note and could only make a nasal sound of dissatisfaction. "By the way, you actually have a child. This is unbelievable. Did Garcia not only give birth to a child in the port of Clearwater, but also be swallowed by Zero in the Battle of Everwinter?" "Cousin," she spat out the two words coldly. "Well, it seems that she is also a substitute." For some reason, Roland felt a little strange. Garcia's attitude towards him seemed to have changed from the first time they met. Although her impatience was still evident, the disdain and disgust she had shown in the beginning had disappeared. As the teachers arrived one after another, the parent-teacher conference finally began. After the teacher on the stage finished talking about the new semester plan, it was time for the students to make their speeches. When Zero stood up, there was a sudden burst of discussion among the parents, and the children all turned to look at her. It had to be said that it was really cheating to keep a witch's appearance in the dream world, especially her natural white hair and crystal-like red eyes, which enhanced her beauty to a unique level. Since the parents also had to stand up to accompany the students when they spoke, Roland had to enjoy the ceremony of being stared at. Zero was naturally someone else's child, while he was a good-for-nothing adult. This could be seen from the doubts and sneers in the other parents' eyes. Everyone was dressed as formally as possible, and Roland's casual outfit with cartoon short-sleeved shirts and half-length pants was really out of place. After returning to his seat, Roland felt that Garcia seemed to be peeking at him, which made him feel even more depressed. She was wearing sunglasses and had no scruples about peeking at him. If he stared back and found that she was not looking at him at all, it would be quite embarrassing. Not long after, he felt his elbow being poked by the other party, and a piece of paper was handed to him. Roland frowned and unfolded the note. The handwriting on it was as if it had been chiseled by a knife. Even if he did not understand calligraphy, he could feel the power contained in the strokes. However, the content made his heart skip a beat. "You're the mysterious martialist who was running on the streets a while ago, right? How the hell did she know?" Roland couldn't help but look at Garcia, only to find that she was still writing something. Soon, the second piece of paper was also in his hands. "Don't deny it. Martialists are very sensitive when it comes to judging figures and remembering the details of movements. When I first saw the news, I felt that it was particularly familiar. Now I can finally confirm it. Did you awaken the force of nature not long ago, or have you been hiding your identity from the very beginning? Answer me honestly. Memory figure. How could it be so exaggerated? Even if I put those videos in front of him, he was not sure that he would be able to recognize me, right?" But then again, Garcia would not go so far as to ask every person who had a similar figure. The fact that she could connect him with the mysterious martialist had, in a sense, proved that her observation skills were indeed far superior to that of ordinary people. Could this be the reason why she changed her attitude towards him? Roland hesitated for a moment. When he raised his hand, a pen was already in his hand. He was going to deny it and dismiss it as ridiculous, but when the tip of the pen touched the paper, an idea suddenly came into his mind. To be honest, his interest in martialists was only at the level of an onlooker, and he had no interest in fighting in the ring. In the dream world, he was at least half a god of creation. If he won, it would be natural. If he lost, it would be even more shameful. Judging from the current situation, he had not received any special training, and based on the level he had shown on TV, he would most likely lose. Compared to collecting books and exploring memory fragments, studying the force of nature was not a high priority. However, he found that this coincidental encounter might be a good breakthrough. If he could take this opportunity to get in touch with Garcia and find an excuse to go to her house, it would be naturally the best. Thinking of this, Roland scribbled his answer on the back of the note. "What is the force of nature? I don't quite understand what you mean. This is something that even kids know. Why are you pretending to be stupid?" After throwing the note, she took off her sunglasses and glared at Roland. "So the sudden increase in strength is the awakening of the force of nature? Force of nature has far more than this. Have you never paid attention to the propaganda of the Martialist Association? I'm not interested in fighting, and I don't want to care about what you said. In addition to participating in competitions, martialists are also responsible for maintaining the order of the city and ensuring social security." "What's that? It's a bit complicated. Let's find a place to talk about it." "Very good." Roland applauded his own cleverness in his heart. Things seemed to be developing in the direction that he hoped. "Really? But I have to go to the company in the afternoon. How about a visit in the evening?" If he agreed now, then the meeting place was likely to be at a nearby coffee shop or restaurant. If he used an excuse to delay the meeting, then it would be difficult for the other party to refuse. After all, 0825 and 0827 were very close to each other. At this time, they would have already eaten dinner, and it would be too early for supper. Therefore, his home would be the most suitable place. Sure enough, after hesitating for a while, Garcia finally nodded. The students and parents spoke on the stage one by one. When it was her cousin's turn, the crowd burst into discussion again. However, this time, the focus of attention was changed from his grades and appearance to his status and background. Is he the son of the Clover Group? It seems that it's not his parents. They are all famous entrepreneurs. How could they have time to attend the parent-teacher meeting? Is this young lady also from the Clover Group? I think so. Judging from her dress, I can tell that she doesn't want to be noticed. It would be great if we could get in touch with her. Save it. Do you know who she is? Why would she talk to you? Who the hell is the Clover Group? Roland rolled his eyes. It sounded like a big company, but if that was the case, why would the relatives of the boss of the group live in a shabby tube-shaped apartment? Garcia's expression was a bit strange. Although her eyes were hidden under the sunglasses, her clenched fists and the lowered corners of her mouth revealed her attitude. Chapter 699. Night Meeting with Garcia. After dinner, after Zero went back to her room to review her homework, Roland came to the door of apartment 0827 as he had promised. He knocked on the door several times and it opened with a squeak. Garcia still had the same cold expression. Come in. Entering the apartment, Roland found that her decoration was much better than his own apartment. The floor had been replaced with a solid wooden floor, there was a special shoe cabinet at the door, a crystal chandelier overhead, and even the white paint on the wall had been repainted. Judging from the gloss, it was definitely not the original paint that had been applied in the early days of the apartment. I don't have extra slippers. You can wear mine first. She pointed to a pair of furry rabbit-eared slippers at the bottom of the shoe cabinet. I like to wear large ones. They shouldn't be too small for you. Roland tried to put his feet into the slippers. They were not small, but they were winter slippers. He felt hot all over. Besides, the furry rabbit ears on the slippers. He really could not imagine what Garcia would look like in these slippers. It was totally different from her indifference that kept people thousands of miles away. He walked to the sofa and sat down. By the way, do you have water here? I might have put too much salt in the dinner. Garcia frowned and glanced at him. I only have ice water. Then let's have ice water. While she turned around to go to the kitchen, Roland poked his head into the room. All the apartments in the apartment were basically the same, except that the two adjacent apartments were symmetrical on the left and right sides. 0827 was the next door, so the passage facing the door must lead to the storeroom. Sure enough, at the end of the passage, he saw a cubicle of similar size, but Garcia had obviously redecorated it and replaced it with a sliding shutter door. The good news was that this kind of sliding door was usually not locked. The bad news was that she might have dismantled the iron door and rebuilt the outer wall during the renovation. When Garcia returned to the living room with the water, Roland had already pretended to be indifferent, leaning against the sofa and watching TV. Thank you. He picked up the glass of water. Do you live here alone? During the parent-teacher conference this morning, they all said that you're from the Clover family. I'm not, Garcia interrupted coldly. 3 leaves have nothing to do with me. You can even say that we're enemies. Enemy? Roland was startled. Then your cousin, they know this and want cousin to persuade me to go back. She looked a little depressed. If I leave, the group can tear down the building. So the expansion of the shopping mall next door is a project of the Clover Group. Otherwise, who would dare to demolish these cultural relics in public? Garcia was puzzled. You live in a tube-shaped apartment. Why don't you know this? Oh no, the other party was not Zero, but a mature adult. If she inherited the character of Princess Tilly, it would be even more difficult to fool her. Ahem. I rarely care about what happens in the streets. Besides, I lost my job a while ago and haven't been out for almost half a year. Roland hurriedly changed the topic. Do martialists have other jobs besides participating in competitions? Yes. Competitions are equivalent to competitions and training. Spreading martial arts to the audience and winning prizes are not the most important content. Our top priority is to fight against the erosion of the outside world. What erosion? Roland asked in surprise. You know about the fallen evils, right? They're one of the most common ones. They're not people who have awakened the force of nature and lost control of their power, but the erosion of the outside world has turned them into another kind of creature, Garcia said in a low voice. Ordinary force can't do much harm to fallen evils, so we need to stand up and fight against them. Roland could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, a faint sense of unease rising in his heart. The dream world was being eroded? What do you mean by the outside world? I can't tell you too much unless you join the Martialist Association and get a hunting license. Why? Because not all people who have awakened the force of nature will stand on the side of martialists, Garcia said word by word. Many people even hope that the forces of the outside world will enter our world. They're hostile to all human beings, so the hunting license not only allows martialists to fight against the fallen evils, but also allows martialists to kill those awakened people who try to disturb the stability of our society. So that's why it's called a hunting license. Roland suddenly felt a little creeped out. In other words, if he was confirmed to have awakened the force of nature and refused to join the association, wouldn't he become their natural enemy? Garcia seemed to see through Roland's concern and shook her head. There are indeed some people who don't want to join the Martialist Association or work for those evil people. These people are called the Middle. The association won't do anything to them, but the fallen evils are different. Most of the Middle people like to act alone, so they're often attacked by the enemy. So if you don't want to join the association, you'd better never expose your power. Looking at the Princess Tilly, Roland could not help but feel a little strange. She always looked indifferent, but in fact, she was not that difficult to communicate with. When he first met her, he even thought that she was an arrogant lady who did not like to look people in the eye. After he expressed his doubts tactfully, Garcia rolled her eyes. The first thing you did when you saw me was to reach for the weapon on your back. Do you think I should give you a look? Fortunately, you didn't take out your weapon, or you'd definitely go to the hospital and get a cast. Just then, Garcia's cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen and could not help but frown. I'll take a call. Then she picked up her cell phone, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door on her way. Obviously, she did not want Roland to hear the content of their conversation. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Roland immediately stood up, took off his rabbit ear slippers, and walked quickly to the end of the corridor barefoot. Through the gap of the shutters, he saw the things stored in the compartment. Garcia had actually turned it into a cloakroom. In addition to a variety of dresses, there were also many women's underwear. However, nothing could stop him from exploring the truth of the world. Without hesitation, Roland pushed open the shutters and walked in, smelling the fragrance of the clothes. After passing through the layers of clothes, an iron blue door appeared in front of him. And he also noticed that there was a layer of dust on the handle of the door, which was in sharp contrast to the clean surrounding walls, although there was no padlock on the door. Did Garcia not enter or leave this gate of memory? But now was not the time to think about this. Roland took a deep breath and gently opened the door a gap. Chapter 700. It was already the next morning when Roland woke up from the dream. Roland waved his fist excitedly on the bed. His guess had come true. It was not just his room. Every resident in the apartment of souls should have a door that led to the memory fragments, and the place where the door was connected to was most likely the place where the defeated had placed their greatest hopes. If he was not mistaken, the last memory of Princess Garcia was in the port of Clearwater, the starting point of her lifelong struggle for the throne. Since Garcia might hang up at any time, Roland did not go further into the world behind the door to check. After all, he was in an awkward position, and it was not a pleasant experience to be treated as a clothes thief by a martialist. Before leaving 0827, Roland had tried to ask Garcia about the gate of memory by complaining about the useless iron door in his house. However, Garcia's response was very indifferent. She was not interested at all. This meant that either she was lying, or she did not notice the weird iron door even though she had renovated the whole utility room. If it was the latter, it would be worth pondering. Perhaps the residents in the Apartment of Souls could not access this dusty memory at all, and he was an exception, so he could see and open the memory gate. It was easy to verify this. Next time, he could ask Zero to go to the utility room with the excuse of cleaning, and then he would know the answer. All in all, this was definitely an exciting discovery. Of course, he did not need to investigate every resident thoroughly. The demon that Zero had devoured was the key. They had now become residents of the Apartment of Souls. If he could find them and enter their memory fragments, he might find some information that would be helpful to the battle of divine will. When he came to the office, Vendi had been waiting in the room for a long time. There was a stack of resumes on the desk, which were the detailed information about the 4 witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Although he had learned the general situation from Yorko, it did not prevent him from reviewing them completely, especially the things that happened in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Roland looked through the records written by Vendi and Scroll together, and his eyes finally stopped on Annie's name. When he first heard Annie's name, he found it particularly familiar. It was not until Nightingale reminded him that he remembered the grudge between the Blood Fang Association and the witches from the kingdom of Wolfheart. However, Annie was a very common name, especially among the poor. There were at least 5 or 6 Annas in 100 women, so it was not unusual for there to be repeated names. However, it was clearly recorded in her resume that she did seek out the Blood Fang Association. Not only was she rejected, but she was also almost sold to the nobles. Therefore, it was highly likely that she was the Sister Annie that Iffy had mentioned. Needless to say, such a coincidence was full of drama. A week ago, he had received a secret flight letter from the fjords, saying that Tilly and the others were already on the way. Now they were almost halfway through the flight. He just didn't know what kind of expression they would have when they met. The reunion was not all joy. Iffy would definitely be filled with joy and guilt. But what about Annie? Would she forgive the person who had betrayed her? Roland sighed inwardly, hoping that time could erase this scar. He closed the resume and looked up at Vendi. Have you decided on today's itinerary? Yes, Your Majesty, the latter replied. They are the North Slope Mine, the steam engine assembly plant, and the Chaos Drinks factory. It was Vendi's idea to let the Witch Union lead the new witches to visit Neverwinter. She thought that it could better let the foreign witches familiarize themselves with the local life, and at the same time, eliminate some unnecessary precautions and misunderstandings. It had become the customary practice of the Witch Union for the witches to visit for 2 days, rest for 1 day, and then voluntarily choose whether to sign a contract or not. Since Roland entrusted the management of the witches to Vendi, she gradually got on the right track. Judging from the places she chose to visit, the cooperation between the witches and the subjects could be reflected, and it could also tell the assistant witches that their abilities were not limited to fighting. Roland nodded with satisfaction. Then I'll leave it to you. Remember to take Lightning and Maggie with you. In case of any accidents, they can also help you control the situation. After all, Vendi was not good at fighting, and he did not think that every new witch would be as easygoing as Anna. With 2 more helpers in the sky and a revolver as a weapon, it would be enough to deal with most situations. I see. By the way, what do you think of the guide? He changed the topic. Do you mean number 76? Yes. Roland took a sip of tea. Normally, an ordinary ransomed slave did not deserve his personal attention, but Yorko praised her to the skies. After listening to the story of his old friend, he also developed a bit of respect for this woman who was willing to sacrifice herself to save others. If there were no problems with her background, it was not impossible to arrange an ideal job for her. She has a good relationship with the 4 witches, especially Amy, who almost treats her as her own family. I think if number 76 is a malicious person, it is unlikely that she would do such a thing in a critical moment. That's what I thought. How about letting her be a clerk in the witch union? I remember there are only 3 or 4 people in your office. With more people, it will be more convenient for you to manage. There were no additional requirements for this position, the salary was acceptable, and the work was easy, as long as she could build a good relationship with the witches. Vendi smiled. If she is willing, I have no problem with it. No. Your Majesty, Nightingale suddenly appeared and interrupted. Don't give her any position for the time being. Roland could not help but be startled. What's wrong? I don't know. She hesitated. I just feel that something is wrong. He looked at Nightingale strangely, and after a moment of silence, he said, I see. Let's put this matter aside. Yes, Your Majesty. After Vendi bowed and left, Nightingale held Roland's hand with a little concern. Sorry, Your Majesty, did I go a little too far? Is it because of the security problem? Yes. Then this is what you should do. He patted the back of her hand and comforted her. You are responsible for the internal security of Neverwinter, so you can't be blamed for being cautious. But your records don't show anything wrong with her. Is there something wrong? Chapter 701. When number 76 walked into the living room, the 4 witches were sitting around the round table and distributing the new food brought by the servants. Good morning, Amy greeted her first. Come and have breakfast. This time, besides bread, there are fried eggs and milk. I haven't tasted such a sumptuous meal for a long time. Well, she pretended to be happy and sat next to Amy. After losing her sense of taste, food was just to satisfy the needs of the body, and the process of eating became a complete torture. However, hundreds of years of training had allowed her to swallow these fragmentary, tasteless things without batting an eyelid. She could even praise them according to the increasingly fainter and fainter impression in her memories. Oh, this smells really good. Really? Amy said vaguely while chewing the egg. The last time I ate fried eggs was more than a year ago. Don't show off when it's only been more than a year. Broken Sword protested. I haven't eaten it for almost 10 years. Ahem. Annie cleared her throat. There's someone who hasn't eaten eggs since he was born. Who? The 3 witches were stunned. Me. Annie pointed to herself and said, when I was still in the village, the neighbor next door raised a flock of old hens. I always wanted to climb in and steal an egg to taste. But my father found me the first time I tried and I was almost beaten to death with a rolling pin. Your father is really an upright man, Hiro said with admiration. Upright? She shrugged. He was just afraid that the neighbor would find out and ask him for compensation. I fed all the eggs I touched to myself and my brother. The living room suddenly fell into a brief silence. Ahem, let's eat first, Hiro said with a little embarrassment. Pfft. Amy was the first to laugh. Ha ha ha. I see, ha. With the first one, the others could not help but laugh. Even number 76 could not help but curl up the corner of her mouth. This group of witches who had been struggling all day long had finally found a place to live. Here, she seemed to see the shadow of Tequila in its heyday. No, it was no longer a shadow. She told herself that this place was about to become the new holy city and witches would inevitably rise again. Because the chosen one had appeared. Hey, didn't you sleep well last night? Amy reached out and wiped the corners of number 76's eyes. It's dark here. Ah, probably, number 76 lowered her head and said, I was so excited last night that I couldn't sleep. Although she only needed 2 to 4 hours of deep sleep to recover her spirit, it did not mean that she could stay awake all day. The overuse of her soul would still manifest in her body, and for them, this was the biggest taboo. After all, a damaged or aged body could be replaced, but a damaged soul was permanent. But how could she fall asleep? In other words, she did not want to fall into the dark sleep at all. No. 76 was afraid that everything was just a dream. When she woke up, the chosen one would disappear without a trace. What she needed to do now was to find out who the owner of the orange light was and contact Pasha. However, this was not an easy task. According to Vendi, most of the witches lived in the witch building in the castle district. She was not a witch, so she could not sneak into the castle by joining the union. She could only rely on the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. Of course, she could take the risk and sneak in alone to screen the chosen one by one. But the latter was definitely not a good choice. It was hard to say whether the chosen one would listen to her, and the green-haired witch with the ability to see through things was hard enough to deal with. Number 76 believed that it was impossible for her to lead the chosen one to escape from the maze ruins while being chased by other combat witches. Although the god's punishment army was the witch's natural enemy, they were not invincible. In addition, the local lord's strength was also worth worrying about. The fact that he could defeat the Starfall city with a large number of god's punishment army was a deterrent in itself. They had lost the foundation of reproduction. Even if they defeated the demons, they had to strengthen themselves with the power of mortals. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before they came into contact with the four kingdoms. Pasha was absolutely right about this. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Tequila should not become enemies with the kingdom of Greycastle. Of course, if the king wanted to persecute the chosen one, she had no choice. She had to protect the person who could determine the fate of the Battle of Divine Will even at the cost of her life. Why don't you sleep for a while later? Amy covered her mouth and smiled. The servant said that lunch and dinner will be delivered on time. We don't have to beg for food like before. It's okay. Miss Nana has completely cured me. Number 76 first patted her chest to show that she was full of energy, and then showed a hesitant look. Lady Vendi will take you to visit Neverwinter later, right? I don't want to stay here alone. Then come with us, Amy answered at once. But there's nothing to worry about. We'll just walk around the street. With one more person, we can take turns to carry Hero. That's right, Broken Sword echoed. I don't like the feeling of staying in the room alone. I'll have to trouble you then. Hero smiled at number 76. Annie was much calmer. Don't worry. I'll mention it to Lady Vendi. Thank you. Number 76 bowed her head deeply. She had to admit that she had fallen in love with these juniors. Even though none of them could be called combat witches, the survivors of the Union had gradually changed their minds after more than 400 years of changing from prosperity to decline and living in the depths of the cave without seeing the light of dawn. However, the envisioned replacement of Hero did not come true. When Vendi came, she also brought a very exquisite wheelchair. Pushing the wheel can move back and forth, and rotating the wheel can also change direction. She personally demonstrated. It was made by Anna and Soroya overnight. With this, Hero can also move freely in a small area. Hearing the name Anna, number 76 could not help but be stunned. Isn't that the senior awakened that Nana claimed? Would they do this for an ordinary witch who had lost her legs? Thank you. Lady, Hero's voice was a little choked. You're welcome. Just treat Neverwinter as your home, Vendi said softly. As I said, all the witches here are your sisters. While Hero was trying out the wheelchair, Annie made a request to the person in charge of the Union. What made number 76's heart skip a beat was that Vendi did not immediately agree. Instead, she turned her head and looked at her. After a moment of silence, she gently nodded and said, well, it doesn't hurt to have one more person. For some reason, she suddenly felt a sense of uneasiness in her heart. Chapter 702. However, it was pointless to worry now. Even if it would attract attention, she had to follow the four of them. This was the best chance to observe the city and the Witch Union closely. Otherwise, once they entered the castle district, it would undoubtedly be many times more difficult to contact them than it was now. Thinking of this, number 76 smiled timidly at Vendi and said, I'm sorry to bother you. I told you that Lady Vendy wouldn't mind, Amy said with a grin. Annie seemed to sense something. She looked at the two of them and did not speak again. Let's go. Vendy clapped her hands and said with a smile, let's go. Today's first stop is the core area of Neverwinter, the North Slope Mine. Mine Mountain. The five of them were stunned. What's so interesting about mining? Number 76 had such a thought in her mind, and she was willing to bet that the others were thinking the same thing as her. Whether in Tequila or the Kingdom of Dawn, mining was always done by slaves or prisoners. The environment in the mine was extremely poor. Coupled with the heavy physical work of digging and transporting, it was normal to die and be injured. Only those who had no value to their lives would be thrown into the mine to fend for themselves. Could it be that the other party's intention was to admonish them and tell them what would happen if they didn't listen to discipline? Rather than a mine, it's the source of Neverwinter's power. Vendy's tone was not threatening at all. Whoever can produce more steel will represent justice. This is also a sentence that His Majesty often says. It's a mouthful, isn't it? On the contrary, when she talked about the king, there was always a smile in her eyes. Anyway, you'll understand when you see it. Represent justice. Number 76 pondered this sentence several times in her heart. What's the relationship between the two? Walking out of the Foreign Affairs building, the snow on the street had been cleared. She did not know what the locals had done, but the hill-like snow piles were only a puddle of water. New snowflakes were still falling slowly, but much smaller than a few days ago. Busy freedmen could be seen everywhere. They seemed to have endless work to do, hurrying through the streets and alleys in the snow. It was obviously a harsh winter in the months of demons, but the whole city was full of vitality. The five-colored stone started to heat up again. She looked around and soon found her target, two figures above her head. No, it was a man and a bird. They were probably here to monitor them. Number 76's evaluation of the Witch Union rose once again. Such means and strictness were almost the same as the small city-state associations in the Tequila era. It was completely different from the Wild Witch organization after the decline of the Union. In addition, she also confirmed that her judgment was correct. With the green-haired witch's clairvoyance and the tracking of the flying witches, it was impossible for her to escape after her identity was exposed. Since we have some time on the way, let me briefly introduce to you some knowledge about witches and their own abilities. The red-haired witch led them all the way to the north and said, from the moment of awakening, witches will face the trouble of magic bite. The church once called it the demonic bite. In fact, it's just a natural reaction to the continuous growth of magic power, which you should already know. Yes, Annie nodded calmly. It's difficult for those who don't know to live past adulthood. I heard it from Broken Sword, Amy said, raising her hand. When wandering in the wild, it's inevitable to use their abilities. I was just guessing at that time, Broken Sword said with some embarrassment. It was the same for the Witch Cooperation Association. Fortunately, we survived, Vendy sighed. Once a witch reaches adulthood, her original ability will be further strengthened and there is a chance to give birth to a branch of ability. The specific manifestation is that the magic vortex in the body becomes clearer and stronger. What's that? Amy asked curiously. Something that every witch has, like a constantly rotating airflow. She touched the little girl's head lovingly. Only a few witches can see it directly. That is the specific manifestation of magic power, its detailed shape determines the type of ability. Is that so? The latter asked in surprise. On the day of the ability test, these are the items that need to be recorded, Vendy said with a smile. At that time, you will know what the magic vortex in your body looks like. Number 76 could not help but frown slightly. Is this common knowledge about the continuation of witches a secret? What is Starfall City doing? The more witches survive, the more raw materials they have to make the gods' punishment army. Why do they even block this information? Has the witches of Starfall City deviated from the will of Lady Alice in the past 400 years? But the day of adulthood is not the end of a witch's ability. Beyond the solidification of adulthood, there is the ability evolution, Vendi continued. There is no limit to the number of times a witch can evolve, and it will not be limited to the original ability. As long as you continue to strengthen your understanding of yourself and magic power, your ability will continue to evolve. Really? Amy said excitedly. Can a witch like me also evolve? Of course, as long as you study hard. Saying this, she took out a thin silver plate inlaid with a red crystal and raised her head. Come to me, I want to introduce you to the new sister. That is, the sigil of listening. Number 76's pupils suddenly shrank. Why do wild witches have the legacy of the holy city of Tequila? No. They did have this opportunity. For example, it would make sense to find one or two remaining sigil of listening from the ruins scattered around the witch empire. But this kind of standard equipment was generally issued to the blessed warriors. As far as she could remember, the Quest Society had never made such a simple sigil of listening. To be honest, it even looked a little like an unfinished product, like a temporary experimental product made by a witch. As soon as the red-haired witch finished her words, the figure in the sky rushed down and soon landed on top of her head. It was a lovely blonde girl and her pet, a fat white pigeon. Everyone was startled. It seemed that they had yet to recover from the shock of the crystal that could produce sounds on its own. Nice to meet you all. The little girl smiled brightly. My name is Lightning, the greatest explorer in Neverwinter. I'm Maggie, coo. Coo coo coo. The pigeon spread its wings and said. My God, the bird is talking. Amy's eyes widened. They are witches, Annie said calmly. Their ability should be related to shapeshifting. You guessed right. Vendi stretched out her arm and let the pigeon land on it. And she is a sister with an evolved ability. So it's not a pet. Number 76 suddenly froze. Wait, what did I just say? This pigeon named Maggie is actually a senior witch. Seeing the pigeon rub Vendi's cheek without any dignity, curl its wings and raise its neck after hearing the introduction, as if to show off its strength, number 76 thought, Is this also a senior witch? In Tequila, they can enter the upper class of the Union and become one of the rulers of the Holy City. It was the iron rule of the Union to maintain respect in front of every promoted witch. Chapter 703. I didn't know this pigeon was so powerful. Amy exclaimed. Coo, coo. Really? Lightning was not convinced. She just has the advantage of being older. When I become an adult, I will definitely evolve into a super powerful new ability. Then, can you tell me what Miss Maggie's new ability is? She has become a flying monster. Although she looks fierce and can cover the sky, she is not cute at all. Coo. Maggie drooped her head. A flying monster. I want to see it. Me too. The witches surrounded them and talked at once. Only number 76 was very anxious. These fools were all amateurs and could not get the key points from their questions. Who would care about whether a senior witch was cute or powerful? Shouldn't the key point be the relationship between ability evolution and magic cyclone, and how to become a senior witch? For the first time, she found it so difficult to maintain a smile. She had the illusion that the corner of her mouth was about to twitch. Seeing that the topic was getting more and more out of hand, she had to say, but Miss Maggie now looks no different from an ordinary pigeon. How can we tell that her ability has evolved? This question might increase the probability of her identity being exposed, but number 76 had no time to think about it. She still had a glimmer of hope in her heart. Maybe they knew the difference between the day of awakening and the solidification of adulthood, but they might still regard some branching abilities as senior awakening. After all, some lucky witches might have multiple branching abilities. Judging from the magic power, Vendi answered her. If the magic power of an ordinary witch is like a cyclone or mist, it will condense into a new shape after evolution. For example, Maggie's current magic power is a stretch of white wings, which is very different from the fuzzy mist before. Magic power condensation and reconstruction were exactly the same as the Union's definition. The last doubt was shattered. If Vendi was not lying, then Maggie was indeed a senior witch. Although number 76 did not have the means to directly observe magic power, since Vendi could say it with such certainty, she obviously had a more comprehensive understanding of evolution. So that's how it is. She suppressed her surging emotions and revealed a look of sudden realization. Your ability is also like this? I didn't gather magic power, Vendi replied frankly. Compared to Anna and the others, I still have a lot to learn. So an original witch became the manager of the entire alliance and even fought with a higher ascendant? Looking at the pigeon's intimate and easy-to-understand expression, number 76 suddenly had a feeling that she had indeed slept for too long. This world was totally different from the tequila she was familiar with. However, the witches from the kingdom of Wolfheart did not feel the complicated feelings in Maggie's heart at all. Apart from Annie, the other three witches teased Maggie and laughed with each other all the way. While climbing up the mountain path, number 76 deliberately lagged behind. She put the finger with the 5-colored stone ring to her eye socket and pretended to rub her eyes. In fact, she was squinting at Lightning and Maggie through the crystal-clear magic stone. As both of them were in the stage of displaying their abilities, 2 eye-catching orange lights suddenly appeared in her vision. The light beam above Lightning's head was similar to that of Annie and the others, about the thickness of a finger, while Maggie's was thicker, almost as thick as an arm. This was in line with the theory that the key of a senior witch should be more complicated. But compared with the light beam from the intruder last night, it was much smaller, not to mention the giant light beam in the castle district which was like a mountain wall. They were not the chosen one. With mixed feelings, number 76 wrote down their names. After entering the North Slope mine, the noise became louder and louder. The witches were surprised to see that the surroundings of the mine were still bustling with activity. The scattered snowflakes and the cold wind did not make them stop their work. Along the way, they could see busy figures everywhere. Unlike what they had expected, they were definitely not dressed like ragged prisoners. Instead, they were all wearing thick fur coats with cloth of different colors wrapped around their heads. It seemed that they were distinguishing the content of their work in this way. Near the entrance of the mine, the ground was covered with many iron bars of equal width. 4-wheeled carts were running on the iron bars. There were no people pushing or pulling the carts, nor were there any horses or donkeys. Bright banners were hung along the tracks, embroidered with huge slogans: "Labor is the most glorious," "Win the future with your hands," 10 years of labor, 100 years of housing, etc. The crimson banners, white snow, and black tracks constituted the 3 main primary colors in the mine. Before His Majesty became the Lord of Border Town, the ore produced here every quarter could only be exchanged for hundreds of golden dragon. In winter, in order to cope with the months of demons, the ore could not be produced. The local people couldn't even feed themselves with their salaries. Vendi stopped and turned around, saying slowly, "After His Majesty came to the western region, he saved a witch named Anna, which opened a new door for witches and ordinary people to cooperate. Do you see those black steel machines? They were made by Anna herself. They can replace manpower to tow the mining carts and remove water. They don't need magic power to drive them and can be operated by anyone. With these devices, the output of the mine has increased more than 10 times. Not only can people's salaries fill their stomachs, but they can also buy new clothes or a place to live. It is this visible benefit that gradually made the townspeople accept the existence of witches. The question you asked before, what is a witch's job? This is the answer: to create a better life." Vendi stroked the red hair in front of her forehead and said proudly, "If you are willing to join the Witch Union and work together to build this city and this home, the people will firmly remember your names in the future." It could be seen that even Annie, who had always been calm, was moved. She gently opened and closed her hands that held the wheelchair, revealing the emotions in her heart without a doubt. The others were a little stunned after hearing the words, "the home of witches." For these refugees, there was nothing more exciting than a warm place to live. Only number 76 was full of doubts. The key to the change described by Vendi was not the witches, but the black machines. How did a local commoner, who was at the bottom of the hierarchy even among mortals, know how to make them? Awakening could only improve her ability and physical fitness, but it would not give her knowledge that she had never seen before. What happened during this period? What Wendy said next made number 76's heart skip a beat. Chapter 704. Passing through a mountain road guarded by many guards, the red brick wall appeared in the snow forest. From the sentries along the road, it could be seen that number 76 would not be allowed to enter such a forbidden area if she acted alone. Senior witches finally had the appropriate treatment. At least such a large number of guards would not bring shame to the name of the promoted. Although she didn't quite understand why this genius would build his residence in the North Slope mountain range, it was a little difficult to understand. In addition, she still maintained a skeptical attitude towards Wendy's statement. In any case, a senior witch who had awakened twice in a row at such a young age sounded too unbelievable. Although the number of awakenings did not represent the strength of one's ability, the perseverance, intelligence, and perception required to awaken twice were incredibly high. There were only a few such people in the entire Union. She did not expect to meet one in the kingdom of the common people. As they got closer to the wall, number 76 found something wrong. Is this really the witch's residence? Over the top of the wall, she could only see a few roofs made of canvas. Not to mention castles or stone towers, she could not even see a one-story bungalow. Here we are. Vendi knocked on the gate of the courtyard wall. The backyard of the North Slope Mountain is the research and development place for all kinds of machinery and equipment in Neverwinter. Except for studying time, Anna usually stays here to work. To ensure her safety, His Majesty blocked the entire mountain road and forbade unrelated people from entering or leaving. So it's just a research institute. Number 76 frowns secretly. And the guards on the road don't belong to Anna, but are sent by the king? Although they say they are protecting her, they are probably monitoring her. Sister Vendi, a lively little girl, opened the door. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Good girl, where's your sister? She's doing a machine test with Sister Anna. And this is? Amy asked. Lucia's sister, Ling White, Vendi introduced. She's now a reserve clerk of the Union and has not yet awakened as a witch. Hello, the little girl greeted politely. Please come in. Lucia White is also a frequent visitor here. Together with Anna, she is responsible for the research on metal materials. Vendi led everyone into the yard. By the way, her ability evolved when she was an adult, and the increase in her magic power was only second to Anna. She's one of the few witches in the Union who can cast the sigil of God's will. Hearing this, number 76 almost tripped over the threshold. Wait, what did she just say? Sigil of God's will. Fortunately, someone quickly asked, what talisman seal? The sigil of God's will, Vendi repeated with a smile. A weapon that requires an extremely large amount of magic power to be used. It was very difficult for ordinary people to light up the 4 magic stones, so His Majesty hung them on the wall of the castle hall for everyone to test their magic power. If you join the Witch Union in the future, you can also experience it yourself. Currently, there are only 4 people in the Alliance who can light up the last magic stone. Everyone is guessing who will be the 5th. Hang it in the lobby. Only 4 people. Number 76 felt like she was listening to an Arabian Nights story. Not to mention where they got the sigil of God's will, just hearing the name again was enough to surprise her. In the Tequila era, it was the exclusive weapon of the 3 chiefs of the Union. Except for the Transcendents who were training all the time, no one else could provide the magic power needed by the Golden Thunder. But here, there were only 4 witches who could activate the sigil. What a joke! Did the Witch Union have more Transcendents than the Union? And according to Vendi's description, neither Anna nor Lucia were Transcendents. How could they become Transcendents? In addition, what the king of the common people did made her feel unreasonable. Since someone could activate the sigil of God's will, he should have seen the earth-shattering power of the sigil, right? If so, why would he put such a precious weapon in the hall for all witches to play with? That was a spoil of war obtained after slaying a greater demon. Did this guy have any common sense at all? Number 76 suddenly felt her head swelling in pain. As for the fact that Lucia was also a senior witch, her heart had gradually become numb to it. In just one morning, she had seen 3 promoted witches. At this moment, she just wanted to ask someone how many senior witches there were in such a border city ruled by common people. Moreover, they did not even have the self-awareness of being superior. For example, now, Lucia had already mingled with the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart under the introduction of lightning. Anna was much calmer, but judging from her expression, she did not seem to have any complaints about the original witches acting as managers. She even showed a sense of closeness and trust in Vendi during their simple conversation. Just when number 76 could not help but blurt out the question in her heart again, someone finally mentioned this point. May I ask how many people in the Witch Union have evolved new abilities? Broken Sword's question was no less than the sound of nature in her ears. But Vendi's reaction shocked her. Vendi counted with her fingers, well, 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, exactly 10. 10. Number 76 did not even have the strength to be surprised at this time. If the information provided by Black Money was right, there were only about 20 witches active in the western region of Greycastle. Neverwinter was just her first stop, and Sleeping Island in the fjords was the gathering place of most witches. However, there were 10 senior witches here. Was this a mockery of the Union's incompetence? Number 76 took a deep breath and did not approach them again. Instead, she took advantage of the time when they showed their abilities to put the ring to her eyes. Lucia's orange light was almost twice as bright as Maggie's, while Anna's was much more eye-catching. It was almost the same size as the uninvited guest who sneaked into the Foreign Affairs building at night. There was no doubt that the 2 of them were not the chosen one either. It seemed that the owner of the light wall in the castle was someone else. But was it possible? Was there a witch in Neverwinter who was more outstanding than the genius mentioned by Vendi, Anna, who had awakened twice in a row? Just when number 76 was puzzled, the door of the backyard was suddenly pushed open, and a blue-haired woman came in. The anti-corrosion results you asked for have come out. These are the test samples. She placed several glass bottles in front of Anna. The best performance of the aluminum alloy is number 1872, just as His Majesty speculated. Thank you, Agatha. Then I'll go. The witch called Agatha nodded and turned to leave without looking at the others. Her demeanor was quite similar to that of a superior in the tequila era. The moment she turned her head, number 76 felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.